You got to wait for a gapper.
That is fair. Down the right field line. Giambi on his way to third. And they're going to wave him around. The throw misses a cutoff man. Shot into the plate. And the plate. Derek Jeter with one of the most unbelievable plays you will ever see by a shortstop.
Live from Chatterbox Sports Studios, it's Off the Bench with Thom Brennaman.
Well, good morning, and a pleasant good Thursday morning to you and yours. Hope your day's off to a great start. Rainy morning here in Hamilton, Ohio. We welcome you to Off the Bench, presented by our good friends at United Dairy Farmers. I'm Thom Brennaman. We come your way 10 a.m. to noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You can find us a number of different ways. We'll start with YouTube/Chatterbox Sports. We always ask, if you're able, please subscribe to the program. You can also find us streaming on Facebook. That's our Chatterbox Sports page. And please flip on the notification switch. You can find us in podcast form. Search Off the Bench with Thom Brennaman, and you're dialed in. We begin college basketball. Sean Miller's team came in wounded. 2 of their 6 rotational players were unable to go last night due to injuries, and you knew it would be a tough one in Milwaukee last night, with first place on the line in the Big East. A converted putback with 1.6 seconds left was the difference in Marquette's 69-68 win. The Golden Eagles were picked to finish 9th in the league's preseason poll, yet now stand a game and a half ahead of the Muskies, Creighton, and Providence. Marquette had been a terrible rebounding team this year, one of the worst in the country, but beat the Muskies up on the board. First time, and we'll talk to Paul about this in a minute, where perhaps they really missed Zach Fremantle. They were out-rebounded 36-32, outscored 15-7 in second-chance points, including the game winner. Around the bend, Xavier has DePaul and Villanova at home. It starts Saturday at 4 o'clock. The UC Bearcats, my oh my. They blow a 16-point lead late in the second half and fall to East Carolina. UC was outscored in the second half of the game, 46-34, slipping to 17-10 on the year. Elsewhere, number 1 is taken down in Knoxville. 10th-ranked Tennessee takes down Alabama 68-59. The Crimson Tide's loss was the 8th this season by a number 1 team. That's the most in any single year since 1993-94. And I tell you, a team we better start keeping an eye on. And we were talking about this off the air yesterday. Northwestern. They beat Indiana last night 64-62, moving to 19-7 on the year. Virginia, Iowa State, and San Diego State were all winners in the top 25. A Texas district attorney dropped a domestic violence charge against former Texas head coach Chris Beard yesterday, in part because of the alleged victim, his fiancée, wishes not to prosecute. What's interesting is that the DA in Austin is one of the toughest in the country when it comes to domestic violence cases, but he could not prove this one. Baseball news, Commissioner Rob Manfred said a plan is in place for all teams to televise their games if Bally Sports goes bankrupt, and that certainly appears to be the case. Manfred would not say specifically how it would work or where you could find the games on a local level. That is a huge story. Yesterday, Bally Sports missing their first interest payment, somewhere in the neighborhood, I think I read, of $141 million, something to that extent. So coming up on the show today, we got lots to talk about. We have Jay Morrison from The Athletic. He wrote a 2-part series that began today about the Bengals offseason, and he zeroed in specifically on the draft and areas of need for the Bengals. They don't have a tight end under contract. All three of those guys are free agents in some form or fashion. The offensive line, is La'el Collins coming back? Or do they dump him and take a salary cap hit? What about Jonah Williams? You know, he's coming back, but it's the 5th year for him. And, you know, do they want to keep him? They want to trade him? Do they see enough from Jackson Carman to play him at left tackle? Do they go out and try to get somebody else? What do they do about it in the draft? He lists a number of players that are potential draft picks for the Bengals, tight end as well, and wide receiver, which was a very interesting part of the story, where he got into guys that might be around, including Jackson Smith and Jigma from Ohio State, who basically missed the entire year. He was thought to be the best wide receiver in the country coming into the season this year. So we'll talk with him. We'll also visit with Bob Nightingale from Cincinnati.com. He's a beat writer for the Reds. And we'll talk about some of the spring training storylines to keep an eye on this year, as the pitchers and catchers had their first workout yesterday. Position players will check in on Monday, start workouts on Tuesday. And then, of course, the best 30 minutes in television twice a week. Our buddy the Tracer coming up at 11:30. All right, we don't have Jay until 10:30. Paul, we start with you. It was our lead story here today. You know, look, there's ways to look at it, glass half full, glass half empty. I would think, you correct me if I'm wrong, I would think you have to look at this as a glass half full kind of thing when you consider their top 6 guys, and you pointed it out yesterday, 2 of them were not in uniform last night.
Yeah, I mean, Marquette, they've played 27 games this year, which means they've played 54 halves of basketball, and the first half was their second worst half of the season. So if you're Xavier, who has been pretty horrific defensively, they played a really, really good game defensively last night, and I think that that's where the issue comes in if you're Xavier, where when you hear the news that you're going to be down 2 of your top 6 guys, 2 of the guys that you rely on to win a game like this, and then you don't have them, your initial reaction is, uh-oh, are they going to lose this game by 15, 20 points? Well, they had every chance to win this game and quite honestly should have won this game. They were in control pretty much the entire way. They were up by 13. Yeah, Marquette took a slim lead here and there. I think the most they were ever up was 3 or 4. Marquette was never in control of this game. And the frustrating part for Xavier fans is that it was the exact same way that it ended on Friday night against Butler, where you give up a full court drive to the hoop and it ends in a game-winning. Last night it was a tip-in. Friday it was a layup, but semantics. It still was a shot at the rim, a good look at the rim. And, well, actually, you know what? I should say it wasn't a great look on the initial look, but Xavier didn't clear everybody out, got the tip in, finished it off. It was a rough night, you know, all around the area last night. Louisville had a chance to beat 7th-ranked Virginia in a huge upset. They lost that one. UC was up 16 with 10:06 left in the game. ECU goes on a 29-9 run to end the game, lose that game. I mean, it was – Kentucky got a good win, but other than that, it was the Xavier loss is tough because that basically knocks them out of the running for the Big East title. I'm not sure.
Why help me here? Why would that knock them out? They've split with Marquette. They still have another game with Providence. They split with Creighton, right?
Yeah.
And they're only, one in the loss column. They're only 1 game back, and they still have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to play?
5 to play.
5 to play.
Marquette has 4 to play. The difference is that Xavier still has to play Villanova, and they still have to go to Seton Hall and to Providence, whereas Marquette only has 4 games left. They do play Creighton next week. That'll basically be for the Big East title. But then Marquette's last 3 games are home against DePaul, at Butler, home against St. John's. So Marquette has a very, very favorable schedule down the stretch. Creighton has a pretty favorable schedule too. Creighton only has they have 5 games left too, but they have St. John's, they have Georgetown, they have DePaul. They have a much easier. Both teams have a much easier schedule. This very much doesn't knock them out like mathematically. They're still right in it. Xavier, if they win against DePaul, they're just 1 game back,
right,
and anything can happen. But just looking at the schedule and the way you expect things to
how do
play
they
out.
determine, help me here, because it's conceivable that you could have, a 3-way tie at the minimum for first place. How do they determine what's a tiebreak on that deal?
If it's just two ways, it would be the head-to-head record.
Okay, but in that case, if it's Marquette, they've split.
Yeah.
Right. If it's Providence, they could sweep or split.
Yeah.
Right. And if it's Creighton, they split. So what happens?
So it would basically be a mini group with each other. So their records against their completed records against each other, and then it would be if all those records are the same. It would be their record against the next best team, which I think would be, it'd be the fourth best team, so whoever came in fourth. It's kind of wild how it's played out. It's never happened since realignment. Nobody has shared a title since realignment. The only teams that have won a title besides Villanova is Xavier in 2018 and Providence last year. So it's kind of uncharted territory the way this is all going down right now. But I do think Creighton and Marquette – Creighton would be my pick. Just because I think the Creighton and Marquette game next Tuesday night is going to basically be for the Big East title. That's a game out in Omaha. I think Creighton will win that game. So they're my pick to win the conference right now. I really don't think that this is the worst thing in the world for Xavier, because if you're not going to win the conference, what you have to hope is that they get into that Thursday night at Madison Square Garden, because then probably Friday night, assuming they both win on Thursday, get a rematch with Marquette. And I would very much, if you're a Xavier fan, you would very much take a rematch over Marquette against Marquette over playing UConn or against Creighton.
Yeah, I mean, look, I watched that game last night, and I've not watched a ton of college basketball. Your point about Xavier's defense, all I've read is how bad it is, and the numbers back that up. But I got to tell you, I mean, in that first half, they were getting after people on defense. I mean, now, their depth certainly was limited. Because of the guys being out. I thought they played really hard on defense in the first half. Marquette got it going, and they're a big, high-scoring offensive team, so they're going to score their points. But it was below their seasonal average when all was said and done. But just from what I watched last night and knowing enough about what I've seen from Fremantle, there is no doubt in my mind that Xavier's a better team than Marquette.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah. I would agree. I would fully agree with that. And to your point, the numbers back it up defensively. I mean, they moved up 11 spots defensively last night in the country. Now, that's not hard to do when you're 101st, but they moved from 101st to 90th in the country last night defensively. And just to at least show that they were serviceable, especially against a team like Marquette that came into the game third they had the third best offense in the country. So to do that down two guys – it was a big step, and it was a shame that they couldn't pull it off. But so it goes.
Brandon Sejo said that game looked like a GCL South game.
The first half, it was a rock fight.
When
Thom.
Moeller beat LaSalle, LaSalle beat Moeller 28-26 in a game last week. They couldn't throw it in the ocean last night.
No.
Sitting in a boat.
No.
Okay, UC. Now look. I have been a big Wes Miller proponent. I think that this guy's going to get this thing straightened out. But I got to tell you, there have been a couple of games here recently, and I'm not going to make a big deal of the Houston game because Houston's a great team, and they were at home, and UC played their ass off in that game. And look, they were right there till the end, and they got beat. But East Carolina. I mean, you got a 16-point lead against East Carolina. Casey, you came in here all wound up, and you're not even a UC guy, as we like to say.
No, me and Trace cooked up a parlay the other night.
Oh, so it all comes back to are you kidding me?
I didn't know
It
this.
always comes back to gambling.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Now we know at least where you're coming from.
I mean, they were up 16. That's all I got to say. I didn't even care to watch the rest of the game because it's like, this is a wrap because of how they played against them the last time. I mean, they beat them pretty significantly.
By 28.
By 28. I'm like, they're up by 16? Okay. I'll move on to the NBA. I had other things to watch.
And your LeBron thing went to the tank.
Yeah, it did.
I don't watch any of the NBA. My son's totally dialed into it. It's very late. I'm trying to get him to go to bed. He's got school. And what's he got on the TV? He's got on a Lakers game. And I'm like, okay, I remember what Casey said to me today. What do you call it? It's a
PRA.
PRA. Points, for those of you that don't know, many of you do, but I just learned it yesterday teaching Thom here, thanks to Casey and Paul. There is a bet you can make. I assume this is on every player in the league every night, right?
Not every
A lot.
player,
The big
but a
stars.
lot
The big
of them.
ones.
The big stars. So like the Lukas and the Irvings and the LeBrons and right, Giannis, those guys every night. So it's a total combined number of points, rebounds, assists. This was LeBron's first game back with new teammates. D'Angelo Russell is back. You know, he's been a little banged up, LeBron has. So it was his first game back since he broke the all-time scoring record. And you bet him to have a higher number than, I believe it was 40.
Well, you could get the going rate at 40. I suggested 45 because I just, for some reason in my mind, it just kind of slipped past me that this would be his first game back, that he was coming off injury. D'Angelo Russell was going to be there, just all those different factors. I wasn't quite ready to I should have done more research before handing that prop out. But again, he was what? He got 33.
I never saw the final
close.
number, but there was a point where I looked and he had like 7 points, and I knew you were in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, he ended up with 33 or something like that. So it still wasn't even close. That's not close at all. At least in my book. That's
So
not
both
close.
of you guys, for the first time, and something we're going to do regularly here near the end of the show, is we're going to get our locks of the night from Mr. Fritzner and Mr. McAllister. And apparently, we have started the year at 0-2.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yep.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Paul,
yeah.
you went with the Crimson Tide of
did.
Alabama.
Yeah, I wish I could have watched more of that game. It was at the same time as Xavier. I kind of had it on in the background, but I was streaming it, and the stream kept dying. It looked like a pretty good game. But, yeah, Tennessee, that's a great win. Great win for Tennessee. For all the people that were kind of starting to, are we in, are we out on Tennessee? They'd lost 3 of 4. So that's a win that Tennessee really needed. Kind of gives you a little bit of concern over Alabama, only because that was a different style of game that we hadn't seen Alabama really win this year too much. Usually they just run the score up and try and get you in a high-scoring game. But
Well, they turned it over 19 times.
They
turn
did.
it over 19 times, you're not going to beat a good team. You can beat a crappy team. Turn it over 19 times, you're not going to beat a good team.
Yep.
Okay, we were talking earlier about the two-part piece in The Athletic this morning, theathletic.com, and I talk about The Athletic all the time on this show. I am a paid subscriber to The Athletic, and you're not going to find better coverage of the Cincinnati Bengals than you get from Jay Morrison and Paul Diener Jr. And Jay Morrison is kind enough to join us, a proud alum of The Ohio University. He's got The Athletic pullover on there. He's also from right here in Hamilton, Ohio. So we feel like we are kindred spirits with Mr. Jay Morrison. Jay, how you doing this morning?
I'm great, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Hey, you know, I was talking about your piece before you came on, the one that you wrote that's posted today. I want to start with this simple question. Can the Bengals, because I have people ask me this frequently, and I don't know the answer, can the Bengals keep Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and I'm talking about long-term now, can they keep all three of those guys and still have a good team?
Yeah, I think they can for the immediate future for sure. Once you get maybe, I don't know, 2025, 2026, 2027, then it gets dicey because the whole thing, the misconception with Joe Burrow going to be signing this this huge extension this offseason is that the rookie contract window is shut, and that's not the case. The way they structure these, I mean, he's due to make $11.9 million this year. He signs for say $240, $250 million, whatever it is. It's probably only going to go up to about $15 million this year, maybe $19, $20 million in 2024, and then you see the huge hit up in the $30, $40 million that following year. That's an assumption, but that's the way most of these contracts are structured. That's what the Bills are going to be dealing with this year with Josh Allen. He's coming on to the third year of that huge deal, and they're going to have to make some tough decisions. So with T eligible for an extension this year, that's another misconception out there. He's not a free agent. He's still under a contract. Well, he came in that same draft class with Joe, so they're both going into their fourth year. He's eligible for an extension this year. Jamar Chase still has 2 years on his rookie deal. He'll be eligible for an extension next year. It depends on T, basically, is this whole thing. I think they could do it. They could structure it that way. This team has been so good at nobody bats 1,000 in the draft, but they've been really good about the way they've drafted lately. And I know some people are going to point to certain picks, Jackson Carman, some other ones that have not panned out. But overall, they've done a really good job in the draft, done a really good job in free agency of not just going out and paying the highest one or two guys on the board, but getting 5 or 6 of those middle guys, and then really mining the gems, the Eli Apples and the BJ Hills, which they traded for, but they find these guys that kind of can come in with a chip on their shoulder that they like, and they develop into something better than what they're actually paying them. I'm sorry, I'm being long with this answer, but my question with T and with Jamar, he said he sees himself as a number one receiver. Well, you're not going to get paid as a number one receiver if you're going to stick around with Jamar Chase your entire career. You're not going to get targeted like a number one receiver if you're going to be playing with Jamar Chase your whole career, or say through a second contract. So that's the decision T. Higgins has to make. Is he willing to take a little less? Everybody's talking about Joe Burrow maybe taking a little less to keep these guys around. Is T. Higgins willing to sign for a little bit less than what a number one receiver would make? We see this all the time. We saw it with Tyreek Hill last year. Mm-hmm. Chiefs couldn't afford to keep the highest paid wide receiver, the highest paid quarterback. They had to let him go. Packers had to let Devontae Adams go. They are hard decisions to make. The Bengals have been so financially responsible. They've put themselves in a position where they can do this if they want, but you're going to have to hit on a lot of things around them to stay good and keep those guys in place.
Explain to me, Jay, because I just don't understand this. Maybe I should. Not the brightest bulb in the room. What is the big deal about a guy being franchised? It almost seems like there's some sort of black cloud that hangs over a player if they're, under the franchise tag. I mean, in T. Higgins' case is a perfect example, and he's the one I'm talking about specifically. You point out he's not a free agent at the end of the year. They could tag him. Now, he would be disappointed he didn't get a long-term deal, but he would also make an enormous amount of money. He'd be paid like a number one guy if he got a franchise tag. What's the big deal about being franchised?
It's delaying that huge payday. And I know, yes, I mean, you had Jesse Bates this year, $12.9 million on the franchise tag, but these guys work so hard and they know that their window is so small in the NFL that a lot of people don't stick around that long in the league. And so you finally hit free agency and you're looking to go out and test your worth on the open market and sign a life-changing deal, a multi-year, multi-million-dollar deal. And the team puts a franchise tag on you and takes that opportunity away from you. You don't get to see what other people value you as, at least for another year. You don't get that long-term. It's a 1-year deal. A lot of first of all, the players, this is in the CBA, so the players agree to this. They don't like it, but their leadership agreed to it. But that's the big part of it. And AJ Green was not happy at all when the Bengals franchise tagged him a few years ago. But like he said, my wife would kill me if I turned down $18 million. They're not going to sit. Same with Jesse Bates this year. He threatened to sit out. He was never going to sit out. You can't turn down $12.9 million guaranteed dollars. So, The number just keeps going up. I think it's right around 20 for a wide receiver this year. It's probably going to be north of 20 next year. Could the Bengals do that? Absolutely. I mean, you guarantee T. Higgins to stay around for another year feasibly. He could sit out. He could hold out. It caused a lot of ripples. But that's what it is. The players just they see it as, I don't know if it's a sign of disrespect, but they just see it as a way of the team having a control over them just when they thought they were going to break free of that control and see what they're worth on the open market.
All right, we know whether it's, style of play, whether it's contract negotiations, it's a copycat league. Should be a copycat league. If somebody out there is doing something well, why wouldn't you want to give it a go, right? So when I sat and watched the Super Bowl, to me, the thing that stood out was each team's offensive line. Chris Jones was a non-factor in that game.
Invisible.
After just completely blowing up the Bengals in the AFC Championship game. Obviously, this 70-sack defense of Philadelphia could not get near Patrick Mahomes. He wasn't sacked one time in the game. You mentioned Tyreek Hill. he leaves. But the Chiefs keep their quarterback. They keep their tight end. They bring in some other guys to kind of piecemeal the thing together on offense, but they throw a ton of money in the offensive line. I preface all of that because in your piece today, where you specifically looked at the draft, so you brought up the three positions, correct me if I'm wrong, I just read it a little while ago, tight end, offensive line, wide receiver. Let's start with the idea. When you look at the Bengals and you know the issues they have on the offensive line, even with overhauling the whole thing last year, why would they choose anything else but an offensive lineman for this draft? Or are they just going, is it possible they just go all in on offense?
I don't know about all in on offense because Hayden Hurst is the only offensive starter that's not due back, who's hit free agency. On the defensive side, you've got Jesse Bates, Von Bell, Jermaine Pratt. You've got bigger holes to address on the defensive side. So I don't see them going all offense by any means, but you're right. I think offensive tackle is the most likely direction to go. The reason they wouldn't do that in the first round is if a bunch of them fly off, and then you're left with a guy that's got a second-round grade that they're not going to reach. And they've always been a best player available type of mindset. And a lot of teams say that sometimes when it comes down to it, they don't follow that because sometimes you have to draft for need. And we'll see what happens. They're not going to make a decision, I wouldn't think, on La'el Collins before the draft. But I do think that he's a good candidate to be a cap cut. He's coming into year 2 of that 3-year deal he signed last year. But he tore his ACL on Christmas Eve.
Yep.
I mean, you don't know if he's going to be ready. And number 2, I don't know. He was an upgrade, but was he really what they expected at that position? It's hard. It's hard to find offensive linemen in this league. So it would be a tough cut to let go of him. You would have to really feel good about what Jackson Carman showed you in the postseason, and you would have to feel really good about what you did in the draft. But it's not just Collins. It's Jonah Williams too.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going into his 5th year, so he's on the 5th-year option. He's going to make guaranteed money this year, but he'll be a free agent next year. When they drafted him, he said, "Hey, they said he's our left tackle for the next 10 years." That's not set in stone now. I'm not sure he's here beyond this year. I'm not sure even if he is here beyond this year if he's the left tackle. Maybe they move him to the right side. They've been adamant that no, he's a left tackle. But if they go get some stud and he outplays him in training camp or in OTAs, then maybe that is a possibility. But you saw the injuries. This team went 15 games in a row with the same exact offensive line, and then they started dropping. The one that survived it was Ted Karras, the center. They don't really have a good backup option at center. They've got Trey Hill, who they took late a few years ago, but the one chance he got to play as a rookie a couple years ago didn't look good. So I don't think you go and you draft a backup interior guy, but that's something I think they will address in middle of this round. But I think it's tackle in the first round unless they start flying off the board or unless one of those elite guys that they've got a high grade on for some reason slips. Then I could see them pivoting, going in a different direction.
You know, as you pointed out in the article, when you look at the highly ranked tackles, and the kid out of Northwestern is by far the highest ranked guy, just up the road in Columbus, you've got 2 extremely intriguing guys. Paris Johnson is a local kid, went to Princeton, but many feel he'll be long off the board, starting left tackle at Ohio State last couple of years after starting his career as a guard. But he is, almost a prototype looking tackle. Great athlete, all those kinds of things. Maybe even more intriguing, though, and it's where getting back to what you said a moment ago about, maybe a guy's grading in the second round, but it seems like DeJuan Jones is a guy that's really starting now, for whatever reason or multiple reasons, to really moving up higher and higher. I mean, he is a monster at 6'8", 350, whatever it might be. Are those the kind of guys that maybe they're looking at?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, anybody that can play tackle there that is available at 28, I think they would look at. But to your point, if that is the case where they go a different direction, I'd be surprised, put it this way, that if they don't have a tackle by the end of the second round.
Okay.
And DeJuan Jones, maybe he's that tweener. Maybe he's a reach at 28, but maybe there's no chance you get him at the end of the second round. So that's where those tough decisions come in. They do like their Ohio State Buckeyes. There's no question about that. I'll be the first to. I'm not a film grinder. That one of the great things, and there's a lot of great things about working at the Athletic, but one of the greatest is we have people that do that, and I trust their opinions, and that's why that the piece today, and then I'm working on the defensive piece that'll either come out tomorrow or Monday. I lean heavily on Dane Brugler, who does a fantastic job, and that's all he does all year long is watch film. He doesn't cover a team during the season like Paul and I do. So I lean on those guys and their opinions, and you're right. DeJuan Jones is one of those guys that just keeps rising and rising, and I can't remember off the top of my head where Dane had him in his top 100.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say it was in the 50 range. But yeah, that's a guy that if he's there in the second round, absolutely you pull the trigger. And he's a guy that if you like him enough, they will get a guy like that in the first round if he's sitting there and a lot of those other big names have gone off the board.
Is there any scenario that you see, just staying with the offensive line for a minute, is there any scenario where you see the Bengals bringing in an Orlando Brown kind of player?
In free agency?
Yeah.
No, I don't think you're not going to see this free agent period look like the last 2 years. I mean, all this money going to Joe Burrow and possibly T. Higgins and earmark down the road for Jamar Chase. I don't see any way they could make that happen. That's the big thing with the Burrow deal is they need to get that done before free agents. They don't have to, but it would behoove them to do that because that's the first domino. Then you can make all the other decisions once you know what you've got in terms of a structure with Joe Burrow's contract. But even the Paul had a piece where the scouts talked about it. It is not going to look like this is going to be a free agency period where you are looking for bargains in the third wave. They're not going to be signing guys on the first day of free agency. Obviously, an Orlando Brown type of guy would be a huge benefit and a big help for this offensive line, but they financially, I don't see them making work.
Okay, you jump to the defensive side of the ball. We know about Bates. We know about Von Bell. We know about Jermaine Pratt. Those three guys particularly. Eli Apple is also a free agent. When I watch the Bengals play, you said you're not a big, film grinder, nor am I. But for me, and maybe 99 out of 100 will say, Thom, you're out of your mind. When I watch Jermaine Pratt play and I watch Logan Wilson play, why am I dumbfounded by the idea of, most of the rumbling out there that they have to give Wilson a long-term deal and not Pratt a long-term deal? I just don't see in the NFL in this day and age outside of most recently, say, a Luke Kuechly or maybe a linebacker who's a big pass rusher, somebody like that who's piling up a bunch of sacks. I just don't see the evolution of the league from an offensive standpoint of signing a linebacker to a long-term deal. Is that crazy thinking?
Linebackers have gone the way of running backs where they are not near as important as they used to be. I think the whole thing with the Pratt and the Wilson thing, it's asset allocation, where right now you have two really good guys. We talked about all these hard decisions they have to make. Jermaine Pratt, they love everything about him, what he's been. I feel like he's improved every year that he's been here, playing the best football of his life at the end of last year. But you've got two really good guys there, and you've got hard decisions to make elsewhere. And I think they're content to let Jermaine go test the open market. Maybe he doesn't get what he thought he would get out there and somehow returns. I don't see that being a reality, but it's a possibility. But then you just kind of kick the can down the road, and you maybe draft another guy this year. You see how Akeem Davis-Gaither develops. He was coming on and playing pretty well in that reserve role last year, and it's just the constant churn. You can't keep everybody, and I think that the talk is that yes, you need to give Logan Wilson a long-term deal, but he's the guy where I think you're going to see them and him want to play a prove-it year this year on his 4th year, and I don't think you're going to see them offer him a long-term extension this year. Wait and see how the 4th year goes, and then he could possibly be a guy that they think about franchising tag. But even then, that would be tough to do, because when you talk about the franchise tag I talked about wide receiver, how high that number is. Linebacker is actually a higher number than wide receiver, because that includes those edge rushers like TJ Watt, guys that are really defensive ends that are making tons of money. And that's what the franchise tag is based on, is the average of the top 5 salaries. So it's just like I said, a kick the can down the road kind of thing. See how Logan Wilson plays this year. See how Akeem Davis-Gaither evolves. See if you draft a rookie who really comes in and plays well. And they're just kind of delaying that decision. I don't necessarily they think that Logan Wilson's up here and Jermaine Pratt's down here. It's just a matter of, this is where we're at right now. We have other decisions to make. It's a hard thing to do, to part with Jermaine Pratt, because they love him, but it's a decision, a game where you have to make hard decisions.
Jesse Bates is a younger man. He makes a lot more money than Von Bell. Von Bell's an incredible leader. There's no debate about that. Somebody from The Athletic, and I'm drawing a blank on who wrote the piece, thought it wasn't, and he's really an outlier in this whole debate, suggesting for a second that Jesse Bates has a chance to come back to the Bengals. Bates and Bell, what would you put their percentages on being back in a Bengals uniform next year?
Probably 5% for Bates, and maybe that's being generous. And then Von Bell, 75, 80%.
Okay.
People forget he's been around for a long time. He's at the end of his 2nd contract. He's still only 28. The Bengals aren't going to pay guys that are over 30 anymore. They learned their lesson. They got burned on Carlos Dunlap and Geno Atkins with that. So what Von Bell means, what his age, and just the fact that I don't think he's going to command a ton of money. And then you throw in the fact, too, that if you let Von Bell go, it's Dax Hill and Brandon Wilson are your safeties. You cannot go into the season, and maybe they draft a couple. Well, they would draft a couple if that were the case. You can't go into the season with that. He's too important of a piece. And I think there's nothing that's a lock, but it feels almost like it's a done deal. Von Bell loves it here. The team loves him, voted him a captain. His first year here, voted him a captain. He's really played well. That first year here, he was a bit of a liability in coverage against tight ends. He's gotten better at that. I just think he means way too much to this franchise for them to let him get away.
Okay, last thing I want to ask you about. You talked about, we've talked a little bit here. We haven't gotten into the wide receiver conversation much, outside of Chase and Higgins and the money they're going to be getting, whether it's this year, the next year, et cetera. In your piece today in theathletic.com, you addressed the tight end situation where they don't have a tight end under contract looking ahead to next year. If they get to the 28th pick in the draft, and we know everything we know about the Bengals, okay, where they are, and we don't know the Burrow contract, but what we know about the team, strengths, weaknesses, needs, etc. If they got to the 28th pick and you had Michael Mayer, tight end out of Notre Dame, or the tight end out of Georgia, one of a guy like that, but Mayer specifically, people are familiar with him, local kid, Notre Dame, big star, et cetera, et cetera. Jackson Smith and Jigba, who was the best receiver in college football on paper going into the year this year, basically missed the whole year. But many people feel like this guy is going to be a major star if healthy, but he wasn't all year. Quentin Johnson out of TCU, phenomenally talented player, right? So if you have the choice of, and I'm getting long-winded here, forgive me, if you were sitting there and you had to make a prediction, the Bengals at 28 have the option of Mayer, I'm not going to say Paris Johnson because I think he's going to be gone. But let's say DeJuan Jones, and then Jackson Smith and Jigba or Johnson. What do you think they do?
I mean, Quentin Johnston is I don't think he has any chance of being there either. I think he's going to be the top receiver off the board, and he is that guy, kind of the T. Higgins mold, the big, strong, deep threat, not necessarily a burner. He would be that ideal succession plan. And I guess if he's there, the questions would be, why is he still there? Because there's probably going to be a red flag somewhere that crops up. I don't know. I love the idea of Michael Mayer because the hometown connection. I think he's exactly what this offense could use with a really good pass catching tight end. I kind of have a feeling they're going to bring back Hurst. If they don't bring back Hurst, that complicates this. I guess I would need to know that to make this call. But yeah, and not knowing the medicals on Leo, it's a hard decision. I'm glad I'm not an NFL GM. I love Njigba because we talked about Chase and talked about Higgins. The other thing that's out there is Tyler Boyd is getting old and getting older. He's not old yet. He's still 28. Very good receiver, but his salary cap hit is getting higher and higher and higher. And can you imagine putting Smith and Jigba in the slot with Higgins and Chase on the outside? It wouldn't matter who you had at tight end. This is tough, Tom. This is really tough.
It is. I mean, this is the stuff that makes it fun. I mean, because
if Johnston's there, Johnston's the guy. And then if it's those other ones, I'm not sure about DeJuan Jones yet at 28. I would probably go Smith and Jigba. That is such an incredible allure to have those three receivers there, and it makes it easier to kind of make the call on Higgins after this year. And even though I went to OU, I do cheer for the Buckeyes as well, so it would be fun to see Jackson here.
It would. He's such an incredible player. People forget that Rose Bowl he had a year ago, which was just, wow. I mean, one of the best games all time in the history of football, college football, by a wide receiver. All right, Jay, we can't thank you enough for making the time for us here today. Sure. And have a great rest of your day. Thank you again.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Good talking to you.
All right. You too. Jay Morrison, kind enough to join us today from The Athletic. Casey, your thoughts on that conversation?
Yeah, if I was in that predicament, it was Mayer, Jackson Smith and Jigba, DeJuan Jones, and Quentin Johnson, right? Those are the four guys that you proposed, I think.
Well, it was based off his article. So, he was just laying out there that on offense, he didn't address a defense, like he said, until tomorrow. So, we didn't even go down that road about a defensive player in the draft, right? But, he was basically, we were just looking at the trio positions of tight end, offensive line, wide receiver.
Yeah, my pick in the draft at 28, without knowing anything about free agency right now, is Michael Mayer. If he drops down to 28, I'm infatuated with the tight end position already. I grew up watching Gronkowski. His nickname is Baby Gronk, Little Gronk. So to me, that's the pick there. He wants to be here. This is his favorite team. Favorite player is Joe Burrow. It just makes a lot of sense. My next guy would be DeJuan Jones. Just the potential there. I mean, the dude is 6'8", has a ridiculous wingspan, fits the profile of the Orlando Brown, not even just the Orlando Brown Jr. It fits that profile, which is just amazing. But the thing about him is if he tests well, I don't think he's going to be there at 28. I really don't.
Well, he's moving up quickly. He's moving. Right. He was a project at Ohio State, and they did a phenomenal job with this guy. He was a starting right tackle this year. And was so good this year, he had another year of eligibility where he could have come back. He's going pro. The other guy's a better player right now, the kid from Princeton, in Paris Johnson Jr., but there is no chance he'll be around by the time the Bengals pick 28. Paul, if you had that choice, let me just say for the record, boys, if those three guys are on the board, there is no doubt in my mind who I'm taking.
Who are you taking?
And that's who Jay said. I'm taking Jackson Smith and Jigba. This guy is a phenomenal receiver. You put him in that group with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, I'll go find Humpty Dumpty to play tight end. Just stay in the backfield and block somebody for Joe Burrow. Are you kidding me? In Jigba? That cat is off the charts. But he was hurt all year, so there are a lot of questions about that. Paul?
Yeah, that's the one thing that gave me pause when I was sitting there listening to that is you'd have to get some sort of assurance that he's healthy and there's no lingering issues. There's nothing there that's going to hold you back going forward. If there isn't and you feel like you can go and get him and have a sound pick there, yeah, it seems like the smart pick. But Tom, it's an Ohio State guy.
Well, that's all we're talking about.
I'll go
they got 5 guys that are projected. I just read an article the other day. They have 5 guys they believe are going to be in the top 50 picks in the NFL, and they've had more players drafted over the last 11 years than any school in the country. So, they got a lot of good players come out of there. It is what it is. So does Alabama, so does LSU, so does whoever else. But it just so happens this year, that the Njigba thing is very interesting. The Mayer thing, I hear you. The only thing, and believe me, I am the biggest proponent of anything, of doing something with this offensive line. But when I look at just those 3 guys, okay, if Smith-Njigba is drafted, he will play right away. And he will be a contributor right away. If Mayer's drafted there, without a doubt, contributor, starter, day one, right?
Right.
The tackle, I don't know if DeJuan Jones, I don't know enough about it. We're just using him as an example. I don't know whoever that tackle is that's taken in the 28th pick. I don't know if that's the guy that's going to walk in the door and start.
Yeah, one day when we have more time and we're not super deep into any off-season talk, well, we will be doing an off-season episode at some point, but we should do, if you were the GM of the Bengals, and just go through every step, draft, who you're bringing back, players you're going to acquire in free agency, and do a deeper discussion, because really we have no idea. They could go defense for all we know.
That's right.
They could get Hurst. They could go cut Collins and then go sign a guy like Caleb McCary from the Falcons, a really good tackle, or they could trade away Jonah Williams. We don't know what that looks like at the current moment. And usually the Bengals do a really good job at coming up with a game plan for the offseason.
Yes, they do.
They went out last season, offensive line, took care of that, so it wasn't as big of a need in the draft.
But like Jay points out, they were signing guys literally minutes after the free agent period hit. They knew they were going after the top-of-the-line guys in Kappa, Karras, shortly thereafter Collins. They knew they had a lot of money to spend in that area. As Jay just pointed out, that's not what this offseason is going to look like. They're going to be looking at the second, third tier guys. Maybe some teams, they got a kind of question on this, and maybe the guy was coming off, being nicked up last year, and, or a team's down on somebody. Eli Apple comes to mind. He was the kind of guy they signed 2 years ago that fits that description, right? Do you trust this team drafting offensive linemen?
Oof. I personally, no, not as of late, but there's certain prospects to me that I feel like are can't miss, that I think any team would be smart. Like the DeJuan Jones thing, for me, that's a no-brainer. I wouldn't fault them. If he doesn't work out, I wouldn't fault them because of the profile that he brings to you. Now, it all depends on the athleticism part. If he tests terribly, then maybe you have more hesitation. But the profile that he brings is just too good to pass up on. But what's so great about this offseason, this NFL draft, is that there is 4 or 5 quarterbacks potentially in the first round, which always pushes down guys that shouldn't be pushed down. There's always going to be a team that takes a chance on a quarterback in the first round, and that's a good thing for the Bengals. Now, the other good thing, too, is that I'm just looking at this right now. There's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys that we're talking about in the first 2 rounds that I'd be happy with at offensive line.
But let me ask you this. In all seriousness, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Okay. And both of you guys, Paul, please jump in on this, okay? When offensive linemen started dropping for this team after going 15 weeks in a row with the same starting 5 offensive linemen, 3 of them go down. Of the 3 guys that stepped in there to start, I have to tell you, I thought the guy who played the best of the 3 was Jackson Carman. Now, we know his story, right?
Yeah.
Second-round pick, Clemson, blindside protector as a left tackle with Trevor Lawrence, okay? had a great college career. He comes in here, he's overweight, he's not in good shape. He gets a chance to play a new position in guard, doesn't go well. Okay, all of a sudden Jonah Williams is hurt. Jackson Carman steps in against Buffalo. Jackson Carman was not awful against Kansas City. He's already had 2 years now under his belt. I mean, are we, I'm not going to say throw in the towel. I think it's a stretch. I could be wrong. I think it's a stretch that if you draft whoever's there as an offensive lineman at 28, and we're assuming a tackle, they're not going to draft a guard at 28. If you're talking about a DeJuan Jones-like guy who is a little bit of a project, still is. I mean, isn't Jackson Carman, are you more confident in Jackson Carman right now than you would be a tackle at the 28th pick?
Well, I think
he's played.
Yeah, I think the scenario that we're talking about here is that we're getting rid of the idea of Collins being ready by the start of the season, and I don't think he'll be ready. I also think that you're looking at a potential either position change for Jonah Williams or you find a trade partner. And then in that scenario, Jackson Carman, I feel like, to me, I would take my chances on Jackson Carman because I don't think there's much of a dip between Jonah Williams and Jackson Carman. And I think he proved enough in the 2 games, and I know he wasn't really tested a whole lot in the Kansas City game, but the upside, it was never about – here's the 2 issues between the 2 of those guys is that Jackson Carman was one of the best athletes in that draft. He was one of the more stronger – he tested well. His issue was drive and the mental part. And just the small sample size that we had, it looked like he was able to mesh well, understood the concept, the running concept, able to adapt, and he looked like he was in his natural position. So really it just comes down to to me, and like I said, maybe we'll do a whole episode or a whole show on this one day, is are you cutting Collins? You cut Collins, you save a little money. Do you get a guy in free agency? If not, you're not picking 28 at tackle. But if they don't do anything this offseason, like go and acquire someone, or they don't cut anyone, or they don't trade anyone, I could see them taking a chance on DeJuan Jones because then they feel like they've got guys around to take a project on. They didn't feel the need to go get someone to replace Collins. They didn't get someone to replace Williams.
So in other words, you could live with Jones being the 28th pick, playing Carman, maybe kick him out to right tackle. Jonah's back at left tackle, and you get DeJuan Jones some playing time this year. Give him a chance to come into camp and win a job.
Right.
Right? And if it doesn't work out, then, a year to develop under Frank Pollock, all that kind of thing, and get better. Paul, you feel that way or no?
Yeah, and the other thing, too, when you're just looking at how this line is shaken out, it's like you have all these decisions to make. What are you prioritizing? This goes back to what we don't know, and we sit here and speculate. We do the sports talk radio stuff and day in and day out, and we all sit here and talk about it. But it all comes back to, in my mind, what the Bengals are going to try to prioritize here. And remember back in the draft when we were all debating Sewell versus Chase, and it was very clear that the Bengals prioritized going out there and getting their wide receivers. Now on the flip side of this, the same point now that we've talked about all week with the Chiefs going out there and just building up their line and having the one target that they have more targets, but they built around Travis Kelce and a great offensive line, and it won them a Super Bowl. So do the Bengals try to mold that? Maybe we see them go out there and do that here in free agency, or they go into the draft, they pick Jackson Smith and Jigba, and they just say, all right, we're going to air it out. Yeah. And we're just going to hope for the best.
And then you just, you figure out what you're going to do protecting the quarterback. All right, let's take a break. Coming up at 11 o'clock, we got Bobby Nightingale Jr., his father, Bob Nightingale, Bobby Nightingale from Cincinnati.com will join us. Believe it or not, we're going to talk a little baseball here today. And the storylines to keep an eye on as far as Bobby's point of view is concerned. He's out there in Arizona. He'll be joining us here in about 7-8 minutes. And then Tracy Jones at 11:30. Ham and Eggers, on the alert. Take it away, Mr. President.
Thank you, Tom.
Where's the president?
Oh,
You want
fly
the
it up there.
I'll throw the president up
Put
there.
it
Hang
up.
on.
It's that time of the show, the Ham and Eggers. These guys are great. Trust me, I would know. I introduce all the best segments.
All right, well, we've been talking a lot about the Cincinnati Bengals here, and because we've been talking about the Bengals, it's time to talk about the Bengals report. And the Bengals, we talked about the Bearcats too. Did all that today so far on the show. The Bengals and the Bearcats, both of those reports are brought to you by Encore Technologies. Encore Technologies provides IT solutions for a data-centered world with a suite of services from mobile computing to desktop to data center, supporting both centralized and work-from-home computing models to improve efficiency and
Productivity.
Visit Encore.tech visit Encore.tech. The path to innovation begins here. I'm not quite to doing that off the top of my head yet, but I think if you give me another week, I'll be there. There is a new premium alkaline water out there, and it's right in front of me. If you're watching the show, if you're listening back on podcast form, then just picture it in your mind. It is Pawnee water. P-A-H-H-N-I. Made in Hamilton, Ohio, Pawnee uses natural limestone filtration, unlike the artificial processing that many other brands use. The result is a healthy alkaline water that is also, quote, the best tasting water in the world. Visit their website at pawneewater.com. That is P-A-H-H-N-I water.com. P-A-H-H-N-I water.com to see where you can buy this great tasting water. Drink Pawnee water, bet with Betfred, get your coffee from UDF, and get your tech solutions from Encore.
Good stuff. This is I'm going to say something for the audience here. If you're interested in Bengals offseason talk, join the Discord. I don't know if you
I'll post the link in here right now. Yeah.
Discussions that we have a whole channel for Bengals talk. If you want to do mock drafts and talk about off-season football, tag me in it on Twitter, CBucksKC. I'm all about looking through mock drafts, free agency, all that stuff. I'm always up for a good discussion on that. Yeah, I mean, I think one day we will take a whole day to do that.
Casey, let's get you some followers on Twitter. How many are we at right now? What are we at?
Not nearly enough, because I follow a ton of different people, so my ratio is just
The
totally
ratio's off. You're at 104. Can we get you to 200? Can we get C-Box Casey to 200 in the next few weeks? We probably can.
How about within 2 weeks? So that is
Start of conference tournament season.
March 1st or 2nd, around
All right.
that. So at the beginning of March, can we get to 200? Now, like I said, I'm all about talking Bengals. You want to
Let's get you
tag
tweeting,
me in
Casey.
that? Yeah.
Let's get you tweeting.
Yeah, get me in some of those discussions, because I'm all about that. But the more important thing
Yes.
that we're going to discuss here is the Reds offseason. And I'm excited to really start to dive deep into the spring training, to get into the groove of baseball season, because I just never really paid attention to it until today.
Well, Casey, you just got one follower, Joshua Morgan, hyping
saw
you
that.
up. He got you.
Hey, real quick, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go
Casey?
ahead.
Do you have, and I'm being totally sincere about this, I'm not being a wise guy,
Yeah.
because there might be some people out there that watch our show and are in our chat or whatever the case may be that maybe are in the same boat you're in, right?
Right.
On the baseball front, okay? Do you have some kind of a game plan of how to start, sort of getting into baseball? And I'm being very serious when I ask that question.
Well, maybe I need to ask you two what the true, how to really truly get into it during spring training, because it's not aired, right? None of the games are aired.
Well, there's about 5 of them, 7 of them, something like that. Yeah.
And so the start of the season too, Bally Sports will still air, or are they still trying to figure that out?
Well, right now they're supposed to have the games on television as we sit here today. That literally, I'm told, could change in 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my game plan is to try to watch at least 2 or 3 games a week from the Reds.
Okay. Start to finish? You're going to sit there for 3.5,
I don't know.
5 hours?
I'm going to watch at least one game start to finish once a week. That will help me kind of get an idea of the players and their strengths. But I think I'm going to have it on in the background while I'm doing other things just to kind of –
But that's baseball.
yeah.
That's how it works.
That's kind of what I've been picking up. What you guys have been putting down is that it's something that you watch in the background, check the box score later. You don't have to watch a whole lot to know.
No,
Well,
but like
here's
Paul
what I-
Doherty pointed out yesterday in his column talking about, are you going to watch the Reds on TV? Are they even going to be on TV with this whole Bally Sports thing? Now if you're doing other things and if you're going to have something in the background, it ought to be the radio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're because of the media, and they're forced to, give you more detail. And you're able to do something else. You can cut the grass.
Yeah.
You cut the grass? Do you cut the grass?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You a grass cutter?
I am.
Riding or
Didn't
push?
used to be, but I am now.
Riding
Push
or
or riding?
push?
What's that? Push. Oh, yeah. I don't have some big, huge,
No zero turn.
estate. Very small lot. Paul, you were getting ready to say before I asked Casey that question. What was on your mind there?
Yeah, I was just going to say that Charlie Goldsmith from the Enquirer just tweeted out. His tweet says, David Bell said the plan is for Tyler Stevenson to catch about 65 games this year, 4 out of 10 days with 3 games in that span at designated hitter and 2 at first base. They have every game planned out. Obviously, that can change due to injuries and circumstances. So that kind of feels like significant news for Stevenson to catch.
That is very significant news.
65 games. Yeah.
Well, look, it's still to be determined, and I don't think he showed up yet unless I missed it yesterday. We'll ask Bobby about this in a minute. Normally when pitchers and catchers report, Tyler Stevenson is a perfect example. A guy who's coming back from injury, they are allowed to come in early to do their rehab and continue their rehab at the team's facility, even though the regular position players are not due to report until Monday. So Stevenson came in. He's a catcher, but he came in. And you wonder if he's catching 60 games. Is he really a catcher anymore? I mean,
Yeah.
Really, is that what he is? They're certainly laying the groundwork for him being a first baseman a year from now when Votto's contract is up. But I was getting to Votto. There has to be some question as to if he's going to be ready to play, not only in the regular season, but even starting in spring training. They're not going to rush him back. But yeah, now with the DH, this is the only thing that I see as a positive to the designated hitter, and we could argue that from now until the end of time, is that you're able to get guys in a lineup like Stevenson, who I think we all agree, when he is healthy, he is a legitimate offensive force and would be in the middle of any lineup.
Yeah.
Guy can hit.
Yeah, I'm shocked that that's what they're coming out and saying right now. Because, I mean, isn't the thought that he would have caught every day or close to it? In 65 games, and that's not even, well, I guess it is just a little over a third of the season, but still, 65.
Well, that tells me that he's going to be Kurt Casale's going to play a ton. He's back. So he's going to be catching a ton. He's a very good handler of pitchers, outstanding defensive catcher, good guy, good leader. I like Casale quite a bit. And so that tells you that Stevenson, they're going to spell Votto, probably against certain left-handers or, day game after a night game. Stevenson plays first base, but he is going to be, I'd bet money that means if it's 65 behind a plate, there's no way he's going to play 60 at first. So, he's going to be basically, for all intents and purposes, splitting between a DH and catching.
I do have a question because I'm not really familiar with the positional importances of baseball.
Right.
But I imagine having your catcher not always being the same, like if you're always in and out of the lineup at catcher, doesn't that kind of throw off your pitchers too, like the consistency there, or is there no?
I think that's a very astute observation by you, Mr. McAllister. Don't you, Paul?
Absolutely. Look at Casey. There we go, Casey.
I mean, that's naturally that's what I thought, but I don't know. Is that the case? Do you think that'll really matter? I know Stevenson is a pretty damn good catcher, but I know he was hurt a lot last year, so does it really matter?
Look, they brought back Casale, who is familiar with some of these guys. He was only gone for 1 year, right? Out to the Giants. Kurt Casale last year.
I'd have to look.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
So, he knows a little bit about, even though the staff is very young and Castillo is gone and all those kinds of things. He's a smart enough guy where he'll get that figured out. And Stevenson's been around all these guys in his minor league career and coming up to the big leagues. So he's familiar with these guys. They'll be okay.
Seattle, too, real quick.
Yeah. Well, he moved from the Giants to Seattle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he only played like 16, 17 games there or something.
Right. And Casale's an outstanding defensive. He's just a good player. Yeah. He's a good, solid player. And the Reds need Stevenson's bat in the lineup. So, whatever the best place to do is. And look, I heard an interview with him yesterday, him being Stevenson. And, he got hit with a pitch, 100-mile-an-hour fastball, breaks his collarbone. Now, that's bad luck. But he's also had some concussion issues. He talked about, you really never know until you get in there and you take one of those foul balls that tip the bat and smokes the catcher right in the face mask. I know you have a face mask on, but I always go back to Bob Brenly, my old broadcast partner, all-star catcher in the major leagues for 10 years with the Giants. And he used to say to me all the time, when you see a catcher, take a foul ball off that, that tips the bat and then pow, right in the face mask, he said that's like somebody walking up and punching you in the face. That doesn't sound too bueno.
No, it doesn't.
Those are tough guys. So we're waiting on Bob Nightingale. I would bet that says he is tied up in this whole press conference thing. With David Bell. They get there very early in the morning. David changed that whole thing when he took over as manager where, these guys have to be there at like 6 o'clock in the morning and then have that's a bit of a stretch, but not far from being a stretch. And that's when the beat writers meet with the Reds manager. And, they go through their drill in his office there and talk about every little thing known to man. And then, the writers are there all day long. Go in the clubhouse. It's open for a little while. Then the guys go out and do their thing. And you're waiting around for a lot of them afterwards before you even sit down and start writing your stories. I tell you, for those of you that are thinking about or wanting to become a sports writer, great occupation, great job, no doubt about it, especially when you're covering, professional sports or major collegiate sports. But boy, Paul, those guys work their asses off.
Oh, man, you have to grind, and you don't see the things that go on behind the scenes and the hours and the stories that you write that get cut, right? You're there, you're at every game, you're at every media session. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes as if you're an aspiring beat writer, if you're an aspiring broadcaster, whatever it might be. Thom, you would know it better than anybody, but it's just there's so many things that go on behind the scenes that it grinds you, and it does. It's the same way. Even if you look at basketball, whatever, you're still you're at practice every day. If you're the Bengals guy, you're at practice every day. It doesn't matter. And it is a grueling schedule, especially in baseball where you're traveling so much. These guys that now, as people have started to return to travel since COVID, because during COVID, a lot of these guys weren't traveling. But now that COVID is behind us and we're back on the road, you get those beat writers that are gone for half the year.
Well, and what's really weird is not weird. That's the wrong word. Just the word on my mind. But when for years and years and years, it used to be where the beat writers could fly on the team's charter plane from time to time. Not all the time, but from time to time. And the best case, the best example of something like that is, say the team is finishing a 7-day road trip, and the last game is a Sunday in Denver. So after that game, the team and the broadcasters and the coaches and the trainers, et cetera, traveling party of the team, they get on the plane after the game and they fly home. Now, you're going to get home very, very late, but you're going to get home that night. And oftentimes you have a game the next night at home on a Monday night. Well, for the writers, they no longer fly on that plane. So you're not going to get out of Denver on a Sunday night by the time they write their story, file the story, et cetera. So you're having to spend the night Sunday night, get on a plane probably at 6:30 in the morning on Monday morning, fly back to Cincinnati, land, and with a time difference, maybe you're on the ground at home for 2-3 hours max, and then you're right back in the ballpark by 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So their whole travel schedule is so different than the traveling party is. So it's become even tougher and tougher for those guys in the way that when you're assigned to be a beat guy. Now, they get some time off, and they deserve some time off, but that's the way that works. So I'm going to make sure here real quick that I have not heard from Mr. Nightingale. Let's see. Yeah, 9 o'clock Arizona time, unless he's got something messed up. I'm going to shoot him a note real quick. Okay.
All right.
Go from there and see what happens.
Okay. We have Tracy Jones coming up in about 15 minutes, too.
All right. Well, here's a wise guy, Brian B. Tom, help me out. Where is Kyle Schwarber from?
We should have a button for this.
Yes, we should.
All right. Can we roll right now? Can we record just so we have it in the file?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
We can do that right now?
Yep. Just give a few seconds.
You say when.
Go ahead.
The pride of Middletown, Ohio. So we'll file that away.
File that away.
Every time we talk about him, there we go.
We'll put that on the board, the audio board.
Put it on the board.
Huh. Purchasing GSS says, come on, Tom, do it. I just did it.
Probably a little behind the stream.
Okay.
Probably a little behind the stream.
All right. These guys now are all going off in the chat about. Then the next time you do it the other way, because they say it's very good for the way the grass grows. But, I mean, when I get to the end, I have to just do a U-turn and go back the other way. What is zero turn?
Well, this deserves a teaching Tom moment, but a zero turn is a riding lawnmower.
Well, yeah, I said I'm on a push mower. So what the hell's wrong with? I mean,
so you have two control.
Now I know what you're talking about.
And it turns. So then you're not making that U. You're literally turning. Not like exactly turning, but it's pretty much 0 degrees where you're not like having to do
you're
a
right,
huge
Casey.
turn.
We'll get you a zero turn mower, Tom.
Yeah.
I don't need a zero-turn mower. I don't need a riding lawnmower. I don't have a big enough yard to cut. Now when I had somebody else cutting it, they would come in on a zero-turn, rider.
Yeah.
But I mean, I enjoy walking and doing it and pushing it. And it's the only lawnmower I have, and I'm not going to buy a new one.
Now, I will have a push mower at my house, but my old house in Blanchester, it took 3 hours to mow with a zero turn. And we have a giant yard, giant lot.
Well, that's got to be 2-3 acres or something probably, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
about. And it's because we live on a property that is also a business, so that kind of
It's your responsibility to cut it.
It's a responsibility. Well, my mother loves to cut the grass, so we were always fortunate enough. Sometimes I would do it, but she said I did a horrible job, so she would take it back over.
It's funny. My dad was always the same way. I don't know if he's listening to this or not, but he was always the same way. I would go out and cut the grass, and then all of a sudden it'd be 2 weeks later, and he'd say, "No, I cut it today." And, well, you asked me to cut it. Well, I like cutting the grass. It gives me some exercise. So I think our guy Bobby's coming in here in just a second.
What are you asking me? You're talking with Bobby now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Bobby's coming on. He just walked out of, as I suspected, he's just walking out of the clubhouse out there in Goodyear, Arizona. Well, when I was out there last week, every day was 72, 75, sunny. The day we're flying back on Monday, it was 50, rainy, cloudy, chilly. And Bobby Nightingale looks like he's in the sunshine right now. Although, Bobby, you got the hoodie on. Is it still a little chilly out there, bright and early out there in Arizona?
Oh.
Look at that. He's frozen up on us. I think,
Yeah.
right?
No, it's freezing. It's been colder here than sea.
This connection's not good.
We're having a bad connection with Bobby. Why don't
right.
you take him off and see
Yep.
if we can't get him straightened out with you over there? And
Wait. We might have him here. There we go.
okay. Bobby, do we have you a little better this time?
Oh, we did.
No, we lost him again?
Yeah, we lost him again.
Okay, because he's doing that on his phone, it looks like.
Yeah. If you can hear us, just go to a good spot.
Okay, we'll see if we can get this straightened out with him, and hopefully we can. He's moving around. I can see him off in the
Moving and grooving.
monitor. He looks like he's good right now, doesn't he?
I know. That's what I thought. Oh, and then it cuts out.
And then he froze up again. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll be getting to him, and we can talk about. All right. I can see him again. I can see him walking.
Good commentary. Give us a little play-by-play action here.
The way that works is his right foot, then the left foot. Then the right foot, then the left foot. And you're grateful when those things work. You can never lose sight of such little things. You thank God every morning, right? You were on his wake-up list, and that your body's working. You're able to walk. You're thankful for that.
I think that's better.
All right,
Okay.
let's try it.
All right, Bobby, well, hopefully we finally have you here. We appreciate your time this morning. You were saying it's colder there than it is here in Cincinnati?
Oh yeah, it's freezing. I think it was like 35 this morning, 40 yesterday. I think the hottest it's been is probably 50, or 55 maybe. So it's not true spring training yet. It's like winter training.
All right, let me ask you now. The regular the pitchers and catchers have reported they had their first workout yesterday. Position players come in on Monday. They'll work out Tuesday. For you and for Reds fans, what are the 2 or 3 storylines that you're most focused in on right now with the very, very beginning of spring training?
Well, I think the first one has to be the growth of the 3 starting pitchers they have: Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, Graham Ashcraft. They're all entering their second seasons. They all had promising moments in their rookie years, not maybe like totality. It wasn't the greatest of seasons for each of them. But like Hunter Green finished as dominant as anybody in September. Nick Lodolo seemed like he got better at each start. Graham Ashcraft probably didn't show the upside that the other 2 showed, but had moments where he looked really good. Solid number 3 starter. So I mean, if those guys take a step forward, I think the rebuild looks a lot better going into 2024. If you can say confidently, okay, those Nick Lodolo and Hunter Green are frontline starters, and Graham Ashcraft's firmly a mid-rotation guy. I think you feel really good about that. So I think that's the number 1 storyline. Number 2 is Joey Votto, once he arrives, just kind of how he looks. Possibly his last season as a Red is the last guaranteed year of his contract. So I think that's something that's got to be something that's watched all year, and especially for a guy coming off major surgery like he is, with his shoulder, his rotator cuff, and his bicep. I mean, there's a lot of hitters who have shoulder surgeries and don't come back the same hitter. So I'll be curious to see how he looks. And then 3 is just kind of what prospects emerge. I mean, if Ellie De La Cruz, everyone talks about him, but also some other guys. I mean, like Matt McClain and some pitchers, Brandon Williamson. If those guys can come up to the big leagues and take steps forward, I know there's a lot of negativity after a 100-loss season, and rightfully so. But a lot of young guys who could take steps forward, and you'd feel better about it if they come into the picture and cement themselves as everyday players.
Are you getting any word? We just reported a second ago. I'm not quite sure where, but has David Bell come out and said that Stevenson's only going to catch 60-something games this year? Is that right?
Yeah, that's been their goal. Kind because they signed Kirk Casale and Luke Maley, so they're going to have 3 catchers all year. But the goal is to make him almost like he'll DH as much as he catches. He'll play some first base. The goal is to play him 150 games, 140, 150 games throughout the year. And if you look at it, I mean, there's not a ton of catchers who play that much. I mean, Yadier Molina is an everyday guy, JT Realmuto in Philly, but Salvador Perez in Kansas City. But other than that, I mean, most catchers only catch 80 games, 100 games maximum. So it's dialed back a little bit for him to keep him healthy. And also, I mean, if his bat's in the lineup, I mean, he's one of their best hitters they have.
Votto. Have you been led to believe, have you spoken with him on what his health status will be as far as, will he start the regular season on time? Let's start with that.
Yeah, they haven't said yet. The expectations he'll be delayed in camp. He hasn't arrived here yet. Most position players won't be here till next week, but I think he's probably a long shot for opening day just based off the fact I've heard him say, opening day would be great. Like, he'd love to play on opening day, but health is health. Like, if he needs an extra week or two, it doesn't really make sense to rush it, especially coming off the surgery that he did.
Okay. All right. Well, Bobby, we appreciate you taking the time to join us. We may check in with you if you're able to from time to time on what's going on out there in Arizona. We love having you with us. So thanks for walking around the whole complex there so we could get you dialed in. Have a great rest of your day and stay warm.
Yeah, hopefully it'll warm up. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. Bobby Nightingale, kind enough to join us from out there. Bobby's on it, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that dude's on it. He is on it. It's interesting. This Votto thing is going to be one that is going to be filled with a lot of emotion. Because, we've gotten to know Joey Votto a little bit better as he's allowed us to get to know him a little bit better just here over the last couple of years. A deeply thoughtful guy. And, he's been here so long, going to when he first came up, and had such a phenomenal career. But this is now the end of that 10-year, $250 million contract. It expires. Now, there's an option on that thing. But there is zero chance the Reds are going to pick up that option as it currently stands. Is there always a possibility that Joey says, hey, look, that contract's over. I'll sign a one-year deal for, $8 million. I mean, is there a chance of that? There's a chance of that, I guess. There's also a chance that maybe he wants to go somewhere else and try and win. There's also a chance he just straight up retires, depending on his health. Now, he has said all along that he would have walked away from his contract and walked away from the money if he felt like he couldn't be the player that he used to be. So, that's sort of now off the table because this is the final year and he's not quitting tomorrow. So, I just think it's really going to be it's going to be a melancholy year from that standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting, too, looking at this isn't Reds news, but just baseball news. The Nationals, Steven Strasburg, got hurt again. I know he had thoracic outlet surgery, and he's been hurt for years. But he signs that $245, however many $million deal after the Nationals won the World Series, and he's only pitched in 7 games since that. 7 games since a $245 million deal, and he's hurt again. I mean, well, I know a lot of contracts in sports are retrospective contracts based on what guys have done and performed at, and he was a World Series MVP. But man, what a tough deal. And it's, I guess, a little bad luck too that you just keep getting hurt. But
well, I mean, I got to tell you, I've never been a fan of these super long-term deals for pitchers because every one of them, and there will be an outlier or two, but by and large, every single one of those guys is going to miss a year. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then there's just bad luck for some guys. Strasburg, case in point. The one that I just sat there and I said to myself, is there any sanity out there is the Jacob deGrom deal. There's another guy that was in the news yesterday. We're not 2 days into pitchers and catchers reporting. and he's got tightness in his left side. Now, this is a pitcher who, when he's healthy, and I don't care who you're talking about, when he's healthy, he is hands down, no doubt about it, the best pitcher on the planet. And I don't want to hear about Scherzer, and I don't want to hear about this guy and that guy. When Jacob deGrom is healthy, he is the best pitcher in the world, period. But you look at the last 3 seasons, he pitched in 12 games in the season of COVID. He pitched in 15 games in a full year of 2021. He pitched in 11 games all of last year. So the last 3 seasons, that's 27 and 11, that's 38 games. In the old days, that's how many guys used to start that many games in a season, one season. He's pitched in 38 games the last 3 years and was given a 5-year, $185 million contract by the Texas Rangers. And 2 days into camp, he's got to shut it down for at least a couple of days because of tightness in his left side. I hope and pray the guy can pitch. I don't root for anybody ever to be hurt. But Tracy Jones might have some thoughts on that. Tracy, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning, Tommy. How you doing?
What do you got on your shirt there? What is that?
Ron John. Ron John. Just getting ready for my trip to Santa Barbara. This is what I wear on the beach. Ron John. My Ron John shirt. I think it's brand new, but I took the tag off for the show. So I'm all right. I'm good to go.
Is that a surfboard company, Ron John?
It is. It is. Did I ever tell you I used to surf?
No.
Did you know that about me? Yeah, I used to hang 10. And I surfed in Manhattan Beach with my Weber surfboard and wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and would go out there and surf. It was more like eyewash. You know, it looked good. You could tell the girls you surf, but I was a bad surfer. Wasn't very coordinated. And the fact is, I'm not a very good swimmer. So that lasted about 2 times, and then that was it.
Yeah, it's a bad combination. Being a surfer,
it's a real bad combination. Hey, Tom, I got something.
All right,
okay,
go ahead. No, I want to hear what you have to say first.
Yeah, well, you're going to laugh at this, and this is very nerdy, and I apologize, but this is what I did last night. I looked like I didn't get much sleep because I was entertained last night. And Polly, I know you're thinking about that, and Casey, it wasn't that kind of stuff. But a buddy of mine, in fact, my best friend, sends me videos off YouTube of games that I played. And this isn't about me, I promise. It's not about me. But he would send me games that I played in. He sent me the other day a game now listen to this, Tommy, 1987, June 7th. Okay, Astros, Reds. Nolan Ryan against the true creature, Ron Robinson. So I'm sitting there and I'm going, do I really want to get into this? It's kind of late. He says, Trace, he says, you'll enjoy the game. I have to tell you, baseball is sinking, and it's sinking fast. If I could show you and maybe email you that video, you talk about entertaining. They talk about changing the rules, right? It isn't about changing the rules. It's about having good players, promoting those players, and sticking with those players. There was so much that happened in the game from the broadcasters. You had, this is TV, you had your dad, Johnny Bench, and Joe talking about our team. This is a team that had Buddy Bell, Chris Sabo, Barry Larkin, Kurt Stillwell, Bo Diaz, Cal Daniels,
Dave Parker,
Dave Parker, myself, and it was just a team that was loaded. And I think about the team now that the Reds have, they've got nothing. But my point is this, the Astros have the same players and won the division that year with Caminiti, who was a rookie at the time, Craig Reynolds at short, Billy Dorn at second, Glenn Davis at first, Alan Ashby was the catcher, Hatcher was in center, Jose Cruz was left, and Kevin Bass in right field.
Yep.
Nolan Ryan's your starting pitcher. The reason I can rattle off this is because players stayed with the same team. And I thought that was so cool, and everything happened from I took a hard cut against Nolan Ryan, and he stared me down. And Johnny Bench catches it at the time. And so, he's looking at me like, you can't do that to me. You can't take a hard cut at a pitch, of a Hall of Famer to be. And there was just so much there. It was the game, and you'll remember this. It was the game that Terry Francona, maybe the greatest manager of all time and a super guy, fell down rounding third and crawled and was tagged out. And that game, we were going to be swept in a 4-game series against the Astros. We pulled it out 9-1. We had, I think, 17 hits. I had 3 hits, including a home run. But it's not about me. And the game lasted. Now listen to this, boys. Listen to this. We had like 17 hits. We had a lot of hits. 5 pitching change. Game lasted 2 hours and 24 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I talk about, Tracy, all the time, is it wasn't that long ago. I mean, you could have fast-forwarded 10 years later to 1997, and virtually every game you saw, even a 9-7 game, was going to be 2 hours and 31 minutes, 2 hours and 27 minutes, 2 hours 26 minutes, whatever it might be. And that's where I think, along with you pointing out about, so many players moving and changing teams and all that kind of thing. But answer me this, okay? Now, baseball is trying, because of these new rules, pitch clock, etc. What did you notice then about just the pace of the play? Was the starting pitcher not walking around as much? Were batters staying in a batter's box? What did you notice that kept the game moving, if anything?
That's really a great question, because Nolan Ryan was pitching. And you know how much I'm sitting there watching Nolan Ryan. He's taking a hell of a lot of time in between pitches. That's what Nolan used to do, right? I think it was the commercial time wasn't as long. I think that cut out a minute. I think that's a problem. I don't know what it was, but watching that game tells me, and this game is slipping away from us. It's not like football. It's not even like that lousy woke basketball. I mean, it is baseball. And watching that game last night, there's nothing wrong with baseball back then. It was entertaining. It was like a damn soap opera, which was neat. 162 games, a lot of things happening. The broadcasters knew what was happening, would throw that in. Broadcasters, your dad, and I'm going to address this with your dad, which I thought was very unfair. I had the golden sombrero in the game the night before. And so Johnny Bench and your dad are making fun of me because I struck out 4 times. Okay? That's the only time.
Who was that against? Was that against Mike Scott or somebody like that?
You got it. I couldn't have hit him with, what'd your dad say, with an ironing board.
Right.
I mean, he's throwing the balls going every inch way. I would have struck out 10 times in that game. But your dad's making, and the fact is I went out to Cheetahs the night before. That had something to do with it, I'm sure. But your dad's making fun of me. Johnny Bench is they're breaking down what a golden sombrero is, striking out 4 times. And I mean, it's just things like that. It made the game so entertaining. Hal Lanier, the manager, he got thrown out. There were a lot of hits in the game, a lot of action. My point in talking about this, we don't need to change the rules of baseball. We just need to kind of solidify the game and make sure that players stay. And it's never going to happen. But I wish players stayed with the same team, because I just said the Astro team, was that a great team? Not really. But if Mike Scott had got to pitch in that 7th game against the Mets, the Astros would have gone to the World Series and not the Mets. Well, I think Gary Carter said that.
Well, I want to follow up, though, one more thing about what you may have noticed, because this is one thing I did not bring up. We're at a point now, largely because of analytics, where there are far more strikeouts than there's ever been. There's far more walks than there has ever been. And that's because guys are going up there and they're being very patient, very selective at the plate. Did you notice more guys swinging the bat early in the count in that game?
I saw a lot more. Again, a great point. A lot more contact. And Nolan, we beat Nolan, but Nolan got hurt. I think he was out in the 4th or 5th inning. There was some type of muscle strain. But guys were putting balls in play. And the point of getting a golden sombrero was really embarrassing for me. But nowadays, that wouldn't be a big deal, would it, Thom? I mean, look at Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge strikes out. Not that I'm trying to compare myself to Aaron Judge. But the point is, the strikeout is not a big deal. And God, I wish you could watch it, because I'm thinking, I'm going to spend 3 hours watching this game. Very entertaining. Very entertaining. The game is not even close to the same as it is now. And I look at it and I'm thinking, what can you do to change it? Just keep the players in the same team. If there's any way they can do that, it makes it so nice, because you can manage along. It's kind of like the Dodgers, right? I mean, you go back to Ron Say, Billy Russell, Davey Loeb, Steve Garvey, Steve Yeager, Dusty Baker, Rick Monday, and Reggie Smith. And then you're thinking, it comes the ninth inning, you're thinking, you know who's coming off the bench? Manny Mota. I mean, you can't name 10 players on the Reds right now, can you?
No, I can't. I can't. And I'm embarrassed to say that, but it's the truth. Look, some in our chat are saying, well, can't you have a guy for 6 years? Yes, technically you can have a guy from the time he reaches a big league.
Great point.
6 years until he reaches free agency. And I mean, look, Tracy, you were a guy, every player, I think in their mind, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard guys say this, guys that have stayed with one team and guys that have bounced around a little bit. They say, once you get to the big leagues and you establish yourself as a big leaguer, your ultimate goal is to stay with that same team for your entire career. Every player wants to be that guy that's known as just a fill in the blank, right? But once that doesn't happen, or maybe you feel like it's not going to happen, or for whatever reason you feel like you want to get out of there, every player should have the right, and they fought for the right, and they've gone on strike for the right to have to become a free agent after 6 seasons and go where the highest bidder is.
Right. On the chat, that was a really good point, because ownership and the ball club does have control for 6 years. But here's the problem with that. When the player reaches arbitration, they're looking to get rid of that salary. Reds are a perfect example. So I would be perfectly happy if the Reds could hold a team together for 6 years. I got no problem with that. It's when an organization gets rid of a player because they can't afford him in arbitration. But that is a good point. You have control of the player for 6 years. Think about if the Reds could keep a team for 6 years. That wouldn't be that bad, but they don't. None of the small market teams do.
Well, San Diego would be the lone exception. I don't know if you saw or, how familiar you are with this whole, and we started talking about it on this show. We kind of followed your league, trying to see things that everyone else can't see.
Hard to do.
It's very hard to do, and every now and again, we'll stumble into one of those to be more like Tracy Jones. But this whole televised thing and this Bally Sports thing, now you're a business guy, okay? Could you explain to me, because this is above my pay scale, okay? And good Lord willing, I never have to find out firsthand, although I'm drifting there, I think. When somebody files for bankruptcy, okay? And in this case, Bally Sports, you are basically released from all of your financial obligations that you otherwise have contractually agreed to, and now somewhere you can't make the payment, right? How is it that a company is able to file for bankruptcy and yet the company continue to do
business?
Yeah, how does that work?
I mean, the people that lose money are the shareholders and the bondholders. The shareholders are the first to go, and then the bondholders. They just reorganize and go at it. It's almost too big to fail for some of these companies. I mean, a company like Tyco, that went bankrupt. Enron would be an example of they didn't make it back. But a lot of companies, iHeartRadio filed bankruptcy, right, and came back. It shouldn't be allowed. We can't get out of our debts as a consumer. Well, you can, but there's consequences of that. but they can file for bankruptcy and get out of paying debts, and it's just not fair. It really isn't. And reorganize. Some companies can and some companies can't, and that's even above my pay scale. I don't know how they do it.
Well, I'm just having a hard...
It depends on what chapter they file.
I mean, I'm having a hard time understanding what Rob Manfred said. He had his big press conference yesterday. I'm not going to call it a state of the game press conference, but this television issue is the single biggest issue in sports right now, because Bally Sports has the rights to, I think it's 15 or 16 Major League Baseball teams, the same number of NBA teams, the same number of NHL teams, so it's affecting more than just baseball. Although my understanding is hockey and basketball have been much more proactive in sort of looking ahead to what might happen and different streaming things that baseball has been against, and blackouts and restrictions and all this kind of thing. What I'm ultimately getting is, Tracy, is Rob Manfred can stand up there and say, well, we've got a backup plan in place, okay? And being able to televise games in a local market. Could you imagine what would happen to baseball? Now, he says he has a plan. I don't know if he has a plan or not, because he wouldn't get into specifics. But could you imagine all of a sudden if 15 Major League Baseball teams next week or in April or in June, all of a sudden their games are not on television?
See, and that's not going to happen. Why? Too big to fail. You can't have 15 teams, half of Major League Baseball. People can't watch them on TV. That's not going to happen. Again, it's like the government defaulting, right? That's not going to happen. So something will get resolved, and maybe they do file for bankruptcy, reorganize, and continue with the product. But it doesn't seem right, does it? Because
it makes me wonder, for something like that to happen, and we're really going deep in the weeds here on this.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm saying it makes me wonder that, okay, too big to fail, that's fair. I get where you're going with that. But it makes me wonder if it doesn't cost baseball that antitrust exemption. And boy, if that goes away, you talk about opening a can of worms that nobody has any idea what that would be like.
And that's a great point, Tom, because I would love that. Then we would get into a salary cap and something. And that's what I love about football. It's competitive, right? They're paying they have the same cap. But that's not the way it is in baseball. I mean, going back to the whole having players there play for their entire career, maybe you do something like the football and put a franchise tag on a player or a couple of players, right? What would be wrong with that? I mean, football keeps their players around for a while, don't they?
Yes, well, yes, they do. They have the same kind of thing. Theirs is even less because of the nature of the game and, being prone to injury. You basically have control over a player for 5 years. You can opt out at the end of 4 and not give him his 5th year and let him go walk. And so, of course, they don't have the guaranteed deals, at least almost 99% of the contracts in football, like they do in baseball. So in football, I could give a guy a 3-year contract for $27 million, give him $15 million in a signing bonus, and so he's due 12 over the next 3 years. End of 1 year, I can cut him and not pay him the last 2 years of that salary.
Right. I don't, and I just learned this the other day. Even when a player gets hurt on the field, their contract isn't covered. Did I hear that right? Is that possible?
That's a good question.
I thought I heard that. I mean, what pitcher were we talking about? About Syndergaard?
No, Jacob deGrom.
Jacob deGrom. I mean, his contract is guaranteed. Everything's guaranteed. They probably are looking at their Lloyd's of London insurance policy on deGrom right now saying, well, how many games does he have to miss, and do we collect on that? But baseball players, I mean, we sign a contract, it's guaranteed. Football players, the average player is only playing 5 years, right? And some of those contracts are not guaranteed.
I think it's more like 3, yeah.
But what is surprising about football is the upfront money that these guys are getting. That never happened in the past.
Yeah.
So good for them, though. They deserve it.
Let me ask you, we had Bobby Nightingale Jr. on a little while ago, and we were talking about some of the big storylines for the Reds this year. I want to save a little room at the end for you and the Ham and Eggers because we have a number of topics to get through, but I want to get through some serious baseball stuff with you here for a minute since you are, without a doubt, a big-time baseball expert.
I certainly am.
There's no doubt.
At least I...
You what?
At least I think so.
Okay. Well, we do too. That's why you're here.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Tommy.
When oftentimes we have expectations, and I always try to tell my kids, don't get wrapped up in the expectations, because inevitably in one area of those expectations or another, there's a good chance you're going to be let down. Let's focus on some other things than the expectations, okay? So, but there are expectations, clearly, for Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, lesser extent, Graham Ashcraft. Okay. What would be, in your opinion, a successful year for two guys that are basically going to pitch their first full year, good Lord willing, without getting hurt? They both were in the big leagues all of last year, virtually all of last year, but they got hurt and they were backed off some innings from time to time. What would be a reasonable expectation for two very highly touted, talented young pitchers?
I think with Green and Lodolo, I think maybe 13 wins, keeping your ERA under 4, making every start, and just improving, getting your pitches down, being consistent, and just getting better. I mean, because they both have great stuff. Did you happen to see how many 100-mile-an-hour pitches Hunter Green threw last year?
Yeah.
He smoked. I mean, I'm going, you've got to be kidding me. He's so much, his stuff is so up here that it's so impressive. And Lodolo's about as good a young left-hander as there is. But those guys are your 1-2 going forward. But they've got to keep pushing. And I'm going to say something and write this down, because no one ever says this stuff. Stay healthy. I don't know. That's very edgy right there, what I said, but very important for the pitcher. Look at Strasburg. God, he can't stay healthy. Pretty good stuff. And you can pitch and you can play in the major leagues as long as you're 100%. But if you're a pitcher and your arm's 95%, that's not going to cut it, because you really drop down. Those guys, both those guys have great arms. I really like both of them.
Walk me through, Tracy, and let's put aside for a second the whole starting the clock arbitration thing and when you bring a player up and all that kind of thing. But from a mental standpoint, I've heard people say in the past, and it used to make me crazy, because the one thing you better do as a baseball organization, or any organization, but in this case baseball, you better know your own personnel better than other teams know your personnel. And I'm not just talking about their talents and their strengths and weaknesses as a player. I'm talking about their heart, and I'm talking about in between the ears. And here's where I'm getting at ultimately.
Yes.
When you're talking about bringing up a really, really young player, let's say De La Cruz, he's a big prospect and everybody thinks he's going to be a big star, but there's a real good chance if you bring him up this year, he's really going to struggle. Maybe he won't. I don't know. But from a mental standpoint, what are you looking for in a young player when you're thinking about bringing him up, even if it's maybe a little too early?
I'm looking for a guy that doesn't get frustrated and is very consistent. That's what I like. Just doesn't start, has a bad time, but just keeps going. I'll give you an example of a guy that never showed emotion and turned out to be a great player and could handle the big leagues and was called up relatively early, was Eric Davis. Eric, I talk about getting the golden sombrero. Well, Eric did the same thing that game off Mike Scott. The only difference is I'm throwing things, cussing. Eric, you'd have thought he went 4 for 4. That's a professional. That other guy is a bush leaguer. But Eric can handle it. I saw Eric hit 3 home runs in Philadelphia. Same personality, the same attitude. And that's what a big leaguer does. He doesn't flip out. He doesn't get riled. If they get you out a couple times, you were lucky. So just kind of handling it and understanding that this is going to be a little bit tougher than AAA. You start making the jump between AAA and the big leagues, there's a huge difference. But I have no problem bringing these guys up to the big leagues, because you see a lot of young players now. Take a look at the All-Star game and see how many guys are under 25 years old. Yep. All the great players, it seems like, are under 25 years old. So if they're ready, and you should have scouts that say, this guy can hit or this guy can pitch. Let's bring him up and see what he can do. I think that's a great advantage. And maybe De La Cruz is a guy that they really push. Is he going to be a guy that's at shortstop or third base or center field, Thom?
It's a good question. They drafted so many shortstops or made in trade so many shortstops, and normally those guys, you can go play them anywhere, and they're going to be forced to move a bunch of guys around. And so, I guess we'll wait and see how that plays out. But that's a great example in Eric Davis because mentally, I'd hear, organizations, we don't know if the guy's going to be ruined if we bring him up now. And I look at him and I say, you mean to tell me you don't know this guy well enough to know whether he would be ruined or not from a mental toughness standpoint?
Yeah, so his personality and his persona is so fragile that if he goes 0 for 15, he's going to be destroyed. Do you know how many – you're only successful and a Hall of Famer if you're successful 30% of the time. You're going to fail. It happens. But give me a player that's failed because you bring him up too early. Go ahead. I'll wait. It just doesn't happen. That's the media. That's the goofy media that puts out stuff like that.
Well, I don't know. I've heard a lot of baseball executives talk that nonsense, and it used to make me crazy. All right, look, we got a few minutes here with the Ham and Eggers. Tracy, say good morning to Casey and Paul.
Hi, boys. How you doing?
Doing good, Tracy. How are you?
Can I recommend a Netflix that I watched last night, if you don't mind?
Ooh.
Absolutely.
You ready?
Please do. We're always up for that.
Here we go. Now, this was good because there's a lot to this. Because I thought of that J.O. Casey as I was watching it. This show, it's a Netflix documentary, Fear City. And it talks about how the FBI took down the 5 families with the RICO, right? What they did as far as how they could take them down. You associated with the family member, you could take the whole squad down.
Right.
So it was very good. And Casey, I came up with this because I thought they ran a lot of things with the girls, the unions, but I thought of you degenerate gambler. The Gambino family. If you don't pay your debts, Casey, they will break your legs. But at least they did back in the old days. So you better pay up, because I heard you made a bad bet on Tennessee the other night.
Oh, the other night?
No, actually, the bad bet on Tennessee was made by Paul.
Yeah, that was a bad bet on
He
Alabama.
picked the Crimson Tide of Alabama. But look, Casey, with his woke buddy LeBron James, he bet that LeBron would go 45, the number. This is a bet you can make, Tracy, which I wasn't aware of. It's called PRA, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
Points, rebounds, and assists combined
cool.
for a certain number, okay? So LeBron's first game back was last night. Casey was looking at 40 being that number, combined points, rebounds, and assists. LeBron was nowhere near it. So a losing night for Casey and Paul.
How much did you lose, boys?
I actually won 10 units last night, but
There we go. I'm retired, Tracy. I'm taking a break.
Yeah, see, you're smart. That guy over there has never lost a bet. I mean, we've been on for, 5 months now, 6 months. That guy's never lost. He bet women's basketball, he's winning. Bet in the NFL, he's winning. Baseball hasn't even started, he's winning. Come on, Casey. Let's get it together.
yeah,
You're getting married. Save that money.
I need to save my money.
You do.
But
Hey, so listen to this. Listen to this, boys. So I'm watching this movie, right? So my wife's on the couch, and she's got her computer out, and she's all about conspiracies, right? She's all about conspiracy. She's not really paying too much attention. So we're sitting there, and she's saying, JFK isn't dead. I says, he's not. I didn't get in that plane crash. He's living in California. I said, okay. He goes, Michael Jackson, he didn't die either. He's still alive. She goes on, and so I'm just listening. I'm listening. And she says, we didn't land on the moon. I said, we didn't. I says, okay. So I just say, yeah, well, tell me about it. And she's just looking. She goes, Joe Biden didn't get 81 million votes. And I thought, well, 3 out of 4, right? That one is.
Right.
But here's my point, my long-winded point getting to this. One of the crime families was Lucchese, right?
Yep.
The Lucchese crime family. So I'm sitting there, and you got to understand, my wife's got her head figuring out all these conspiracies, and says to me, Deanne, her twin sister, dated one of the Lucchese crime family members back a long time in the 80s. I go, what was that? I never knew that. I says, well, what happened? Oh, I'll tell you about it later. I mean, we've been together for 20 years. I didn't know her twin sister dated one of the Lucchese's in that family, in the Mafia. It's kind of interesting.
I wonder if that would be a good thing or a bad thing to marry into one of those families.
I think it's a really bad thing because all those guys were pulling wool on the side. I mean, can you imagine can you imagine their ABC phones now with all the girls they were running prostitutes? No. If you like to play second fiddle, you would not want to be married to a Mafia guy. I don't think so. Would you think? What do you guys think? Yes? No?
I wouldn't want to be associated with it. What about you, Paul?
Why not? Roll the ball out there. Seems kind of fun.
So, Paul,
I'll tell you, it's a great show.
Are you saying if let's just use Lucchese, and he has a daughter, okay, and you meet her while you're a co-ed at Xavier, because
sure.
a lot of the mafioso, they're Catholics, right, Jesuits,
Yep.
whatever it might be,
Yes.
right? So she ends up at Xavier. You meet her there, okay, you get to start getting to know her, and now she says, hey, why don't you come back with me for Thanksgiving? And you go rolling into Jersey, right? Or rolling into New York City.
It's a great
right?
visual.
Or somewhere out there, and there's Paul. I mean, look at Paul with that haircut and everything. He comes rolling into somewhere close to Atlantic City, and you go to this beautiful house, right? I mean, and all of a sudden you start looking around, and you think, ooh, you kind of you're a perceptive guy.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now you're getting closer with this young woman, and she starts to share with you a little bit about her family. And you find out they're in the waste management business, or they're in the whatever it might be business, right? Yeah. So are you still, and then Dad kind of gives you a look. Paulie, nice to have you here, right?
Yeah.
But my daughter's my princess. We on the same page. When you get back to Xavier in Cincinnati and that flight lands at CVG, and you get back in the campus over there at Xavier University, you hanging around?
Well, what about
with her?
What about me, Thom, makes you think that I wouldn't be able to fit right in with that family?
Well, I'll tell you why. I don't think you have the guts to be in the Mafia. And first of all,
what makes you say that?
Made man. Well, I know your type. I just know you went to Xavier. But you can never be a main man because you're Irish.
I know.
Right? So that's one thing. You could work with the family. Maybe you could be a hitman, Paul. What if they said, you know what, you got to kill that guy? You'd have to do it. Could you do it?
Well, you got to fit in somehow.
You're a hardcore man, Paul.
This show is going to complete nonsense now. Not that it wasn't already, but here we are talking about Paulie visiting Uncle Paulie, maybe somewhere in Jersey.
I mean, I'm
Thom,
your proto.
Could you date a girl? Could you date a girl that was in the Mafia?
Oh yeah.
What would you do?
I mean, I would find a way to fit in, and be almost like the advice guy, the consigliere, not necessarily the attorney.
Robert Duvall.
Robert Duvall. Now, I could find my way into that sort of role, if you will, as long as I didn't have to learn about all the bad stuff. I couldn't live with the really bad stuff. If they came to me and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this with our waste management business, or we're thinking about doing that, a guy like you could step right in there in that role. You could do that, right?
Oh, absolutely. I actually do that with a lot of my clients. I have, like my clients tell me, I have great advice but I don't take my own advice. If you know, I'm always telling people, don't worry so much about the money. Just make sure your health and being happy. And I'm all about the money. Remember, I'm trying to get to FU money. That's my goal in life.
How far away are you from that? In closing, before we let you go, how far away are you and Danae from that?
I can get there at 75. You know who's going to be a wealthy bastard is that Hunter Jones. He don't even know it anymore. He's walking around with
$10 in his pocket and doesn't know what's coming, right?
And I don't know how you've done with your son. My son is the cheapest guy. He still has all his bonus. I don't even tell him how much. I kind of throw him some bucks. But he asked me if he can borrow $100. And he's got like 6 figures in the bank. He's so cheap. And I've taught him so well.
Well, he's not on that gambling train like our friends. So, fellas, you want to say goodbye to Mr. Jones?
See you, Tracy. It was good seeing you.
I tell you what, I don't want to build my kid up too much because the other night he went to the BA. So that was a little disappointing for him. I had to talk to him and say, you need to not go to that place anymore. That's not good for him. That's not good. He actually ordered the 29 dance with mayonnaise, and that dance now comes with bacon. So if you're interested.
No, I'm not.
Thom?
But thank you, Tracy. Nice to see you. Have a good
See you,
rest of
boys.
your day.
Have a good weekend.
See you,
You do
Tracy.
the same.
Watch that show.
I will. I will definitely check out that show. We'll do that. Okay.
All right.
I got to get through Breaking Bad.
Oh, yeah. Where are you at?
No,
with
I
Breaking
can't.
Bad?
When you're married, and you guys will find out. And, my wife works her tail off on stuff around the house. I don't mean like, cleaning stuff. I'm really good at helping on those kinds of things and laundry and stuff. But as far as just the business of the family in the house.
Yeah.
Whether it's looking at bills or having to call somebody on the phone to argue a bill, whatever it might be. And she's great at that stuff. I have a hard time when she's back there busting her tail, and I know she is, for hours at a time. Last night's a perfect example. I have a hard time turning on back-to-back episodes of anything.
Hitting that play next.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I didn't watch last night. All right, we have a
Cherry on top.
Cherry on Top presented by United Dairy Farmers.
This one's near and dear to the city of Cincinnati.
And we need you guys to have your lock of the night after that.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Presented by Betfred Sportsbook. This one presented by UDF. We're going to play the commissioner's comments here.
Hey, Rob. When you hear a team president in January say that his team already has zero shot at contending or even being a winning team, what is your reaction? And also, do you agree with him that a quarter of the teams to a third of the teams have zero shot before we have a pitch in spring training?
Look, I think that most people who pay attention to our game realize that we do have a disparity issue in the game, both on the revenue side and consequently on the ability to spend on players. I think sometimes in markets that produces frustration that leads to what I regard to be unfortunate comments, not helpful.
Those are comments made by Rob Manfred. That question was asked, it sounded like, by C. Trent Rosecrans. And I'm sure referencing the Reds.
Yeah.
And the comments made by President Phil Castellini. Look, you just saw a perfect example of the difference between Rob Manfred and Roger Goodell. As that question's being answered, Manfred is, one of these, like, you can tell he wants to explode, right? You can just see it, right? And then he catches himself, gathers himself. Okay. Goodell, you would have had no idea. If it bothered him, if it made him happy, have no clue. All right. Tomorrow, Tim McGee going to join us, working on a few others. Want to get Tim McGee's thoughts on the Super Bowl and that sort of blueprint. Should the Bengals be rethinking what they're going to do this offseason? Tim's been watching this team for years and years and years. Was on a Super Bowl team back in '88. and he's watched him every step of the way ever since, including the last 2 years to the AFC Championship. Casey, thank you. Paulie, thank you.
No problem, Tom.
Absolutely.
Have a good day, man.
You want our locks of the day? Or?
Oh, yes. Forgive me. Let's hear it. Locks of the day. You're 0 for 2.
Well,
Go ahead, Casey.
I've actually got 2 suggestions here. I'm gonna give one prop, and then I'm gonna actually give out a Betfred boost. So I'm gonna actually talk about the Betfred boost first. Suns beat Clippers, and Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton both score 20 points. Was at plus 250. It is now at plus 300. That seems kind of doable. The current line has it at -1. So that's not bad. I think that's a good deal.
But when does Durant join that team?
I don't think it's tonight.
Okay.
I don't think it's tonight.
Well,
But
you better make sure of that.
right. I don't think it's tonight, but I do think that both teams are evenly matched in terms of players on the court.
Okay.
So I think that's a good game. And then my other one is the same game. Paul George over 2.5 on Betfred. It's 3 or more 3-pointers made, and it's at -125. I think on Betfred. I really like those odds too.
Okay.
I think the game is going to be close. That Clippers versus the Suns game, and I think it'll be a high-scoring game. So I like the odds of the Suns winning, and I like Paul George to make 3, and I like Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton to both score 20.
Okay. There you go.
Those are
Paul?
my 2 picks.
I am taking Purdue.
Oh, you're going to say Purdue, aren't you?
Well, it's a UCLA under day, and I'm debating if I want to give that as the lock or if that's just like a customary, we do that every show. UCLA's under just consistently hits. So maybe I'll stick with the UCLA under. But Purdue -1 at home, I think that's a good bounce back spot for Purdue. I will say, though, Maryland has only lost 1 game at home. So I don't know if I'm going to stay on that game as big as I originally thought last night after I did a little more digging into it. But it is UCLA under day. So I don't even know what the UCLA under is. It was around 130-something. But UCLA under.
Okay.
Mick and the boys.
All right. Well, hey, look, we're just looking for a single win.
So am I.
From behind the desk over there.
I can't remember the
A
last
single
time I
win.
got one of those. All right, let's go.
Are you coming up?
Reed and I right now.
Not too picky coming up right now. Thanks all of you for being with us. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a great Thursday.
Thanks, Tom.
At United Dairy Farmers, we've perfected freshness in our family bakery, where we use only the finest ingredients, like thick, high-quality glazes on our signature donuts, before delivering them fresh from bakery to store every day. UDF, made for you.
If your AC or furnace is struggling, turn to the experts at Bartell's Heating and Cooling. Their certified technicians get the job done right the first time, and if you need a new unit, Bartell's will give you upfront pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ask about Bartell's 0% interest financing for 60 months. Learn more at bartellsheatingandcooling.com. Bartell's Heating and Cooling, for a comfortable way of life. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, proudly sponsoring high school football with 3 locations in Mason, Liberty Township, and Ross, Ohio. Our 10-foot screens guarantee a great view from every seat in the house. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, the best place in Cincinnati for sports, food, and fun.
Where can you turn when you're in pain? Turn where more high school, college, and pro athletes turn. Where your neighbors and weekend warriors turn. Turn to Beacon Orthopedics and Sports Medicine and get superior care on your schedule. That's the Beacon difference.
Check out our fresh arrivals at Jake Swinney Used Cars. Over 250 used vehicles weekly. All makes, all models. From economy to luxury, Jake Swinney, the original used car superstore.
Welcome into Not Too Picky, presented by Betfred Sportsbook. Paul Fritchner, Reed Mouse, Casey McAllister, and Mike Schmaltz coming up here momentarily. Mike is already primed and ready to go. I see he has the Porsche hanging up over his head, and that's what we are trying to work towards here in our gambling picks. And my God, Reed, I have given out winners, but I can't remember the last time I put $1 on something that won. It has been
Not
a
good.
long time.
You've been losing streak.
I just don't
Well, you're
understand.
due then, right? That's how it is. You're either hot or you're due. You're currently due.
I am more due than I think I've ever been in my life. Let's get right to Mike. I need some positivity. I need some good vibes. I know Mike always brings that. And Mike, the people have been clamoring for 2 weeks for NASCAR, and I promised them I would bring you on as the preeminent professional in that industry. So let's go. Let's talk some cars. I have no idea anything about NASCAR, so I'm relying on you.
Well, NASCAR, Paul, they race stock cars.
Okay, well that's a start. All right.
Yeah,
that's a start.
Porsches will not be in there.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Can I start with a little basketball though?
Yeah,
absolutely.
We
love some round ball on this show.
go.
What do you got for us, Schmaltzy?
Let me sprinkle, as Paul would say.
Sprinkle some scratch.
All right.
All right. In the Colonial Athletic Conference, the College of Charleston is a 13.5-point favorite over Elon. I think I'm going to cover it. Here's why. College of Charleston averages 81. They give up 68. They just destroyed Northeastern 99. I think it was 63 on Monday. They're tied for first, 13-2, with Hofstra, and they got 3 games left. So they're going to have to keep the pedal on the gas here because they're in the Colonial. They got to win as many as they can. The first meeting between these two was 78-60. College of Charleston. So I think they covered this 13.5. I think it's kind of generous at minus 110. Who's with me?
All right. He's saying fade and Elon. I just bought some Tesla puts, so we're on the same part.
Pat Kelsey.
You like that?
Pat Kelsey. Yep.
Now, let me travel over to the dark side real quick. The dark side being women's basketball. I know we don't, love that here, but Ohio State's playing Penn State. Ohio State has been they're 2-2 in the last two. The 2 top teams that they played, they got smoked. The 2 lower teams they played were Wisconsin and Minnesota. They won by 26.5 on the margin. I don't know what that spread's going to be. It's going to be a pretty healthy Ohio State one, but they need a get-right special. Penn State is not very good. Win some money on the Buckeyes tonight. Take that.
Okay.
Whatever that is.
Yeah, all right.
We love head coach from Hampton.
If that's 20, don't be scared.
That's Mike's guy. That is Kevin McGuff. Kevin McGuff and Mike Schmaltz, very good friends.
I went to the same high school as him.
We traveled the country together for years.
Nice.
Unbelievable guy. Great
love
guy.
Kevin McGuff. Yes, love him.
Need some answers, though. Need some answers in Buckeye Town. All right, you ready? You ready for some NASCAR, boys?
I think everybody in the chat is ready for NASCAR. Let's go. Let's turn the wheel.
All right.
Left.
So last night they had qualifying. They had a first round of qualifying, so that's going to set the front row. Alex Bowman, Kyle Larson won those 2 qualifying sessions, okay? So tonight there are 2 races. I believe they're 125 miles apiece. That's going to set the rest of the field. So they start at 7. They're on Fox Sports 1. You can get an idea of who might be good in this race watching those. However, keep in mind that they're going to race tonight. The race on Sundays in the afternoon, and there's going to be a lot of track activity in between there. ARC is going to race. The trucks are racing. The Xfinity Series there, so the grooves will change. The surface will get a little stickier. So you can't pick up a whole lot from these qualifying sessions. One, they're at night, and a lot's going to go on between now and the race in terms of the race surface. So just kind of keep an eye on that stuff. Plus, this is the hardest race to handicap ever. This one in Talladega, you just don't know.
Why is that, Mike?
Well, because it's plate racing, so what they do is they restrict the airflow that comes into the engine. You can't make as much horsepower, you can't make as much speed, and therefore they get tight, they pack into the pack, they draft off each other, and it just takes a minuscule amount of air. It could be an 1/8 of an inch, a 1/16 of an inch, somebody goes spinning in the pack, and it's all over. So that's why you end up with the big one, they call it.
Yeah.
So hopefully we don't see a whole lot of that. And we were talking the other day, you made the Super Bowl wager you were trying to do was whether or not the first caution was going to be at the Daytona 500. They average about 7 caution periods, and the first one's about lap 30. So
yeah, I saw a prop, and I'm glad Mike brought this up. I saw a prop. I did not take it, but it was a prop on whether there would be more cautions in the Daytona 500 or whether – what would be, or if the first touchdown of the Super Bowl would be longer in yards than the amount of cautions in the Daytona 500.
Oh, wow.
So if there was a 7-yard touchdown, then you would need 8 cautions in the Daytona 500. I didn't take the bet, but I did talk to Mike for a while about it. I thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, we looked it up, so therefore you get the information. I took time, so therefore I get to share that. It's very important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Paul sends me on these very interesting informational journeys sometimes.
He sends you down the proverbial rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm happy down there. I like it. It's dark. It's a little snuggly. You know, the rabbits lose some fur. It gets a little warm in there. You just kind of snuggle up.
So give us
here
some
we go.
names, Mike. Yeah, let's get.
Yeah, what do you got?
I got names. Oh, I've got names. All right, here you go. So some favorites. You're going to Austin Cindric. This is based on last year. So this will be the new car design as well. So this is the 3rd time they've had it out in plate racing, or 5th time actually it will be coming up. So 2 at Talladega last year, 2 at Daytona last year. Daytonas were 500 and 400 mileage-wise. So to give you an idea, Austin Cindric won last year's Daytona 500. He finished second, I believe, in the second race. So his average finish there was 2.0, and he led the 3rd most laps of the group at 34. So keep that one in mind. Kyle Busch is switched teams. He is no longer with Joe Gibbs Racing. That hurts me a little right here, right there.
Sure.
Now with Childress. He was 6th and 8th last year with Gibbs, but Tyler Reddick was 35th in the first race he crashed, and then he was 2nd in the second race. So the car's good in plate terms. Hendrick's always pretty good, or Childress always pretty good. Hendrick obviously very good as well. So we'll see what Kyle Busch can do. It's the same crew chief Tyler Reddick had last year with Randall Burnett. So the program's there, maybe a little upgrade on the driver. And Kyle Busch hasn't won a Daytona 500, so he's a little motivated that way. He's got a lot going on for him. I'll give you that. Bubba Wallace. He's with the Michael Jordan team.
Yeah.
Bubba. Good plate racer. So last year at Daytona, 6.5 was his average finish. He was 2nd and 11th. Ryan Blaney, they ran a simulation with something called Racing Insights. He won the simulation. I don't know how they did that, but based on that. So Blaney was 9.5 his average finish, 4th and 12th at Daytona last year. Led the most laps of the group, 36. His average finish at Talladega was 6.5. So some good money probably spent on Ryan Blaney this weekend. Alex Bowman's been absolutely terrible at Daytona. He's gotten wrecked, but he's won 3 poles. This is his 3rd one. He averaged a 9th place finish last year at Talladega. He's, again, terrible at Daytona. Kyle Larson, pretty good in plate racing. 11th at Talladega. He's been terrible in the last 2 at Daytona. Okay? So those would be probably my favorites for you. And I didn't see any odds today on Betfred yet. They've got the Xfinity race up. They don't have – yeah, and probably they're waiting on tonight for qualifying. So if you can find any of these guys, it's some decent odds, top 10s minimum, then top 5 for some of these better guys. That would be the play there.
Is there anybody to look?
Value picks?
Well, go ahead.
Yeah. You want value picks? You asking for long shots?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We always are. We always know. Yeah. Let's get those odds.
David Reagan, R-A-G-A-N. Now, he was an old school guy. He raced for Roush. He was in the number 6 car. He almost won a Daytona 500 back in somewhere around 2005. He was in the lead, and then he got messed up. He's been with a team called Rick Ware Racing. They've averaged an 8.5 finish at Daytona. So keep him up there. He was in one of the top 5 in average finish. Denny Hamlin might have a little longer odds. He's going to be one of the favorites. He's a great plate racer, but he's wrecked the last 2 Daytona 2 races, 37th and 25th. So he might have a little longer odds. That would be money well spent. He's very good. You might see these guys hang out in the back of the pack, let the wrecks happen, and then they get up there in the last 30, 20 laps and try to win. Ricky Stenhouse has been very good on the plate tracks. He's gotten wrecked a bunch. He led last year's Daytona 500 with like 6 laps left, and then they had the wreck, and he was out of it. Eric Jones is with somebody called Legacy Racing. That's now a hybrid between Petty and Jimmy Johnson, who's the 7-time champion. He is bought into that team. Jimmy Johnson's going to race in the 84. Keep an eye on that. I don't know how good their stuff is, but Eric Jones is pretty good on plate tracks. He averaged a 6th place finish at Talladega. And then Michael McDowell, who won the race in 21, he's with Front Row Motorsports. He was 6th at Talladega. So he's got a pretty good plate car. He won the Daytona 500 2 years ago. So keep an eye on those teams. This is a race where those teams can come out of nowhere because of the draft and because of the wrecks. Some of those guys that normally don't get a shot will have a chance to get up front.
Mike, I as somebody that knows
literally zero about NASCAR, I always love talking to you about it because I know I'm going to get an information overload whenever Mike comes on and talks about it. Is there anybody for like a casual fan that might, flip on a race here and there? Are there any names to know as far as like the whole season goes? Some guys maybe that are off the radar that you're looking at, maybe some guys that you just mentioned, but outside of just the Daytona this year, just for the whole season.
I don't know about off the rate. Chase Elliott's going to get a lot of attention. He's won the most popular driver award. He won the championship last year. He's pretty good at Talladega too, so keep an eye on him. Ryan Blaney's the other guy. He's kind of in that mid-tier popularity section, but very good driver. He could win it. Then Denny Hamlin's going to be a favorite. Any of those bigger teams, Joe Gibbs. You might see Kyle Busch in there as well. I think that Childress car is going to hold up. They were very good last year with Tyler Reddick. It's weird to see a guy leave that team. But, some of those teams with the legacy and the higher power and better engine programs, that's Gibbs, that's Hendrick, that's Childress. That's those bigger teams there, bigger name teams or legacy teams. But take a look at this other team. AJ Allmendinger, here's a good one. He's going to run for Colleague Racing. They were very good in the Xfinity Series last year. They ran some plate races. They ran some bigger tracks for the Sprint Cup Series, but now it's not called Sprint Cup anymore, Cup Series. He's going to be pretty good, I think, this year. So he's a guy that could be in the top 5 in the standings, maybe even challenge for the championship. They've got good equipment there.
Does Sprint still exist as a company?
No way.
I think it merged with T-Mobile.
Did they?
Oh, yeah. It got because I used to be a Sprint guy, yeah.
Okay, because I was going to say, I haven't heard Sprint in forever, and my mom used to be on Sprint. Yeah. I just haven't heard it forever.
Sorry, that's my fallback. So that was the big sponsor for, 10 or 12 years. So it was the Sprint Cup Series, so I kind of run into that. The other one was the Busch Series, by the way. That was a great one. But, Busch is gone. Kevin Harvick, there's another guy. So this is his last Daytona 500 as a full-time guy. I don't believe he's actually going to retire. I think he'll get back into it, but he's another guy. Plus, with the Busch, there's a contest. Find it online. You register. All you have to do is win. It's hard to do, but if there's a $2 million prize if they draw your name, and Kevin Harvick wins the Daytona 500. So check that out.
$2 million.
$2 million.
That's a start on
that
getting.
That might fix Paul's car.
That's a start.
It helps right back here too. It helps right there with my project.
Speaking of the car, my last question for you on the NASCAR, Mike, and this one is applicable to anybody listening to this, whether you like NASCAR or not. Where are we at on the free gas with Joey Logano?
Still there. Still a deal. It's 22 cents off, but you got to register at Shell.
Okay.
Look,
and that's only if he wins, though, right?
Yeah, he's got to win the race, but it's every week. So if he wins 10 times, you're going to get it 10 weeks. It's a pretty good deal.
Sign me up. Sign me up.
It's worth it. I mean, gives you another reason to watch, right? Or any reason to watch.
Sign me up. Mike, do you have any other? And you already talked basketball. Do you have any other picks? Anything that you haven't talked about yet?
I was taking a look at Purdue and Maryland. So Purdue's -1 on the road there at Maryland tonight.
Yeah.
This is men's basketball for clarity. I don't know. Purdue's been struggling a little bit.
Yeah, they lost. They've lost 2 of 3, and Maryland doesn't lose at home.
Yeah, they're 13-1 at home.
Yeah. So that's interesting to me. It's -110 either way. So take a look at that. Maybe you research that a little bit. I think Purdue's kind of ready to get back into it, right? We've got 4 or 5 games left in the season, so time for them to turn it around.
Yep. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Mike, you're the man, and the chat appreciates you, Mike. I know they do.
Boys, let's go racing. This is as close as I got to the checkered flag.
I saw the checker. I knew the checker. I knew the checker had something to do with it. There we go.
Love it, Mike.
Right, so here's the deal. If you win the $2 million with Kevin Harvick, you have to have a light blue Porsche. That's the color of his car. So it would have to be like a baby blue, kind of a, that swanky blue.
Sold.
I mean, yeah.
Don't twist my
arm.
Yeah. If I have to.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I'll tell you what, boy. If I win that, we're all getting them. We'll just get 3.
We'll get 3 Porsches.
I'll
make the same deal.
I will do that too. Deal. Yep. You'll get a Porsche, and you'll get a Porsche. And you'll get a Porsche.
You're never penalized for buying in bulk. Never penalized for buying in bulk. You get a discount.
Wholesale.
Did they sell them at Costco?
Probably. I mean, it's
light blue Porsches.
buy the kids one. All right.
Always check the website.
Thanks, Mike.
See you, Mike.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Sir Boy Wonder. Paul and Reed looked so confused.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I had no clue.
Well, that's why I said you just got to – I told Mike, I said,
Mike cook.
I'm not going to know anything. You go. You just take the reins, and you talk about NASCAR, and that's what he did. That's what I was expecting.
Mike's a great chef. We just let him cook.
You get in the kitchen, Mike. You
Right.
Gordon Ramsay this thing, and we'll get after it. Okay. You know what I want to talk about tonight?
Sling it my way, Big
I want to talk about the Eastern Kentucky Colonels.
We do love the East Kentucky Colonels because of Seth Pryor.
Because they play tonight, and Seth Pryor is a loyal viewer of this chat. I hope he is in here right now. They play Central Arkansas tonight. Ken Pom has them as 13-point favorites. Betfred has them at 12.5. The over-under, listen to this, in the Eastern Kentucky and Central Arkansas game that tips off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight is 162.5.
What?
162.5.
That is so many points. So
it might be the highest one of the night.
So last night, Xavier and Marquette, where their total was like 161, 160, somewhere right around there.
Yeah.
They hit the under in the first half, their first half total, by 25 points. It was like 75, and they hit 48.
Oh, they weren't even close.
Yeah.
They were bricking shots left and right. Xavier, outstanding defensive effort last night.
That's what they're known for.
Couldn't close it out at the end. They are known for their defense. That's exactly right, Reed.
So are you taking the over?
I'm taking the under. Oh, well, hold on. Let me do the math here. Ken Pom's projecting this at 159.
So take the under.
Take the under. 162.5. Take the under.
Doesn't believe in Seth's.
No, I believe in him.
Seth Colonel's ability to score points.
But they haven't hit that total. They haven't hit that total.
You're just not a believer.
They've hit it one time since January 12th, in the last month.
It's okay. You're not a believer. Speaking of over-unders, you know what today is, right? Happy UCLA under day.
Happy UCLA under day. I changed my lock on Thom's show from Purdue to UCLA, but I stuck with the rebound rundown, 1.5 for Purdue. Whoop!
Do you not like that?
I don't like it as much as I did last night. And again, it's just really tough when you're recording the show at 12:45 in the morning and you're trying to figure out what's one line here as your eyes are crossing and trying to look at all these lines that have just been released on the app. It jumped off the page to me, which usually when I think, oh, this makes sense, I try to look the other way. I like it as a rebound spot for Purdue, but at the same time, Maryland just doesn't lose at home. And I go back to this Providence thing where why should the Friars have won the other night except that they were at home, and they did. It has come down to one. It's the first game of the second game. No, it's the first game of the night. There is a game that tips off in an hour and a half.
Yeah.
The St. Francis's. St. Francis, Pennsylvania, St. Francis, New York, tip off at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. That's a pick'em game, basically, the 1-point spread. Purdue and Maryland is also a 1-point spread, 1 point to Purdue.
First game of the night, so there will be an appetizer in the Discord later on that one, but I like Maryland in that.
Yeah.
I hate Purdue as an IU.
You hate Purdue.
Purdue.
You hate Purdue.
And Maryland doesn't. They've played well, 13-1 at home. Their only loss this year at home is against UCLA.
Did you see my text about Indiana?
No. Oh, yeah.
The good doctors at Indiana may have cured me.
Well, they might not give you the cure.
They might not give me the cure. That's
you
right.
hate them so much.
Yeah.
I like Maryland in that. And also, the other thing that we always bet the UCLA under, so that's just a guarantee. It's 130 is the line. They're the last game of the night at 11 p.m. They face off against Stanford. The line is exactly at 130. The other game that we always take that the books might be finally catching up on is we've been fading every game that Ohio State has played since basically January. He brought this up about 3 weeks ago, and I faded them every game. They have not covered in 11 of their last 12 games, and in like 8 of those 12 games, they've been favored and have lost outright.
And you know what the one game they did cover?
Was against Purdue?
Was against Iowa.
Was against Iowa.
And they play Iowa tonight.
7.5's the line. in Iowa.
The books have definitely caught up because this is a Ken Pom 5-point spread, and generally that would be put around 4.5. Usually it's a half point lower than whatever the Ken Pom number is. So this is 3 points different than what I would have expected in this game. Ohio State is playing like straight booty cheeks lately. 51st on Ken Pom. They can't win. They can't do anything. They can't score. Do we take the Buckeyes tonight?
I will not take the Buckeyes.
I will
So
not.
similar to the UCLA under, I will ride that gravy train till it loses me money, and I've already committed. So I'm going to go against Ohio State again, just a little bit. Sprinkle some scratch.
Yeah.
Not a big bet. But I'm going to go
That's
Iowa
at 9.
again and see what happens. Maybe the gravy train will keep rolling.
Not a ton of good games tonight, but the nice thing is that they are spread out. So Purdue and Maryland play at 6:30. Ohio State and Iowa play at 9. Gonzaga plays at 11. The UCLA game is also a West Coast game, obviously, playing later, but I think it's pretty late. It's at 11 on ESPN2. That's against Stanford. That's going to be a brutal game. Stanford is terrible. They did just beat Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona's 11-point favorites against Utah tonight.
Yeah.
The Utes are getting 11 points in
Utes.
Arizona.
Where is it?
It's in Arizona.
Oh.
I might take the Wildcats.
It's nothing tomorrow. New Mexico and San Jose State.
It's Friday. There's never
nothing tomorrow. Every once in a while, there's some good A-10 games. But.
So why don't they? So they have the big Monday night game.
Yeah.
Why don't these leagues just shift one of these Saturday games? Like 2 leagues shift one of the marquee Saturday games and be like, all right, it doesn't even have to be a ranked matchup, just something to watch. Like Iowa, Ohio State, throw it on a Friday.
Yeah, I don't really know why they don't do that. I look at last week, Xavier played at Butler on a Friday night. Next week, Xavier plays at Seton Hall on Friday night.
Those are nice.
Yeah, they're not fantastic games, but they're
Right.
not terrible games. They're high major games. I don't understand why we don't have just at least one good high major game set every Friday. The A-10 has generally put a decent game on Friday night, like a Dayton VCU or one of those types of games has been on Friday nights. But yeah,
George Mason, George Washington.
Those are the ones that really, the Georges, the battle of the duels, the George duels, they get the blood flowing.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know why. But Saturday, decent one. Not the best Saturday that we've had lately. At the top, there are some good ones. Baylor and Kansas play, and Kentucky and Tennessee play. I could rattle off the Big 12, but that's just any given Saturday in the Big 12. Texas A&M, Reed, is going to be a very interesting case study this year as to what the NCAA Tournament Committee does with Texas A&M. Right now, the Aggies are 19-7 on the season. They are in second place and very much in it in the race in the SEC. It's really just Texas A&M that can challenge Alabama right now for the SEC, and I think Alabama is going to win it fairly easily by the time it all shakes out. But they're only one game back right now. But Texas A&M is in second in the SEC, and there is a fairly significant chance that they could miss the tournament. They have 5 games left. They are only probably going to be favored in one of those games, and that's against Ole Miss. If they go 1-4 down the stretch, they're going to miss the tournament. And for a team that's 11-2 right now and at 19 wins on February 16th,
Just played bad to begin the season, right?
They just didn't play anybody at the beginning of the season, and they did take 2 terrible losses. Yeah, they just didn't play anybody in the non-conference. But yeah, not a fantastic Saturday. But I say that, not a fantastic Saturday, and then it always ends up being
great.
Like there's a game that we didn't expect. Sometimes that's what you get.
Sunday,
it's your typical, the Big Ten plays on Sunday. Iowa's at Northwestern. Northwestern's a wagon right now. Cincinnati's at UCF on Sunday. That's a big one for Cincinnati, especially after last night's disaster. That's a big one for Cincinnati. UCF will probably be favored by about 3.5 in that game. But
so we're taking Logano Sunday.
Logano Sunday. It's the only name. Logano for free gas.
We got a bunch of those. I'm taking Maryland tonight. You're taking Purdue. Purdue.
I got to do some soul searching.
You're taking the EKU under.
EKU under and UCLA under.
And then we might sprinkle Iowa just because.
Just because it's on brand.
Just because it is. And then we've got
Casey.
What do you got for us, McAllister?
I am looking at something right now really quickly before I make my final final few bets here. But I really like the Phoenix Suns -1. I like that.
Okay.
I also really love the over for the Wizards and the Timberwolves. I think that's going to be a very high-scoring game. And because of that, I also really like let's see here. I also really like Bradley Beal points and assists. I also really, really like
Aren't you retired?
No, I actually got back in the game. I'm up. I got 10 units last night.
Oh,
Almost
baby.
11, so I'm back in it.
Baby.
I'm trying to see here. The Clippers and the Suns props I'm nervous about because they match up so well.
Yeah.
But I like the props for the Timberwolves.
Okay.
So and the Wizards. So I'm gonna go Anthony Edwards and Bradley Beal. I like those two props. Something with points. I haven't decided what yet. And
the Suns to cover. The Suns to cover.
Get you on the graphic.
And the over on the Wizards.
We got it.
All right.
Look at Casey just throwing out NBA picks. No one knows more about the National Basketball Association
than Casey McAllister.
Who's the logo?
The logo?
Yeah.
It's not Michael Jordan, is it?
No. It's a directional name.
Directional name?
Yeah.
His last name is a direction.
His last name is a direction.
Played for the Lakers. Point guard. Jerry West.
Jerry West.
There it is.
Jerry West. Paul, do you know who the logo of the MLB is?
No.
Harmon Killebrew.
Huh.
The more you know.
The more you know. I didn't know it was Harmon Killebrew.
There you go.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll be back tomorrow, box lunch tomorrow after Tom's show, after Off the Bench, and then we'll go on into the weekend. This has been a presentation by Betfred Sportsbook of Not Too Picky.
See you guys.